A ver.
Sí. Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Mi nombre es Ana Lilia Bernal Hernández.
My name is Ana Lilia Bernal Hernández.
Yo solo quiero dar
I just would like to
a saber de los rampas de los buses,
let you know about
porque
the bus
yo
ramps.
tengo un niño en silla de ruedas
I have a child on a wheelchair,
que necesito para que podamos pasar por las calles,
and I need ramps so that we can
pasar.
so that we can pass or go in.
Y también en las Salinas y Cacique
Salinas and Cacique,
no hay rampa para subir al bus con la
there
silla
is
de ruedas.
not a ramp to get into the bus when you have a wheelchair.
Y la calle donde necesitamos la rampa es Eucaliptos en Salinas,
The street where we need the ramp is Eucaliptus and Salinas.
en Oldinos en Salinas.
Perdón.
¿Oldino?
Oldinos and Salinas. No, ¿cuál es el nombre?
Oldilo en
Dillon.
Salinas.
Dillon.
Dillon, yeah, sorry. Sorry. Yeah, es todo lo que
That's
yo.
all that I would like to say.
Okay,
Gracias.
Thank you.
all right. Marie, followed by Ana Rico.
Hola, María Delgado.
María Delgado.
Mi nombre es María Delgado.
My
Yo
name is María Delgado.
tengo un niño de 18 años de silla de ruedas
I have a
que
son, 18 years old, also in a wheelchair.
él habla sign language.
He speaks sign language.
Y necesito, si por favor podían poner para poder recogerlos
Something so that it can be picked
en
up.
silla de ruedas ahí en 227 Sur Salinas en la
27 South
en la
Salinas, so that
parada,
it can be picked up on a wheelchair.
porque es que perdón, es que porque como el motivo de que cuando llueve tenemos que correr, tenemos que caminar 2 cuadras o 3 cuadras
We
para
have to
arriba
walk 2
o para
or 3
abajo,
upwards or downwards.
y se nos hace más fácil si podrían poner para que nos podrían recoger los
It
bases
would be easier for
ahí
us to
en Salinas,
bus to pick us up in Salinas.
para que nos ayudaran, se los agradecemos mucho.
We will thank you a lot. That will help us a lot.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. All right. Ana Rico.
Hi, how are you guys?
Hi.
My name's Hannah, and I'm here also for Salinas Street. I've lived around there, also Punta Gorda, which is really dark, and Cacique is really, really dark. When we take our kids, even when the time changes, we want to go to the store, the kids want to go bike riding, scooter riding, it's really, really dark. There's lights. We need more lights, and when we cross the streets, the cars don't respect us walking. And that's an issue for me because there's a lot of kids. We have the Cleveland kids, we have the Adelante kids, we have the Franklin kids, and the cars don't respect that we're crossing. We're halfway the street and the car's already right behind us. That's an issue for me. I have 2 kids and they love to play outside. So lights and the car, the spinning mostly. And Salinas, it's one of the streets that it's really, really awful. But thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think I was just, maybe Eva can clarify, was this one for right now? Okay, Joel Schwimmer. And that's the last one I have for items not on the agenda.
I'm Joel Schwimmer. I live on Quinientos.
Could you speak into the mic?
I'm Joel Schwimmer. I live on Quinientos Street. I wanted to comment that I think a big problem for my street, Quinientos and Mason, where I observe a lot, is the drivers are racing between Salinas and Milpas both ways, and similar to what the other speaker said, they go way too fast. They get to the intersections way too fast, so people are afraid to walk into the street and cross because they're way too fast. There's parked cars as there should be, and that means you can't see the cars coming. So people basically are afraid to cross until they actually see a car stop. And I think that something should be done to slow the speeding drivers down on Mason and Carp and Quinientos.
Thank you. All right. Any other speakers for items not on the agenda? Okay, so quickly, we have one more item for just the TCC, and that's the approval of minutes from January 26th meeting. Use the mic. Sorry, there's a motion, a motion from Ms. Horn. Is there a second?
Is there no discussion?
Well, once there's a motion, then we can have discussion. So,
Okay, I move we approve.
Okay, and a second by Mr. Kaufman-Gray.
Yeah, I just have a comment.
Okay,
I just want to thank.
can you pull the mic toward you?
I just want to thank for the details of this set of minutes because it was such a very important meeting. I'm glad to see that it was done almost by verbatim instead of how we normally do it. So I appreciate all the work that was involved in doing this because this is an amazing set of minutes. So thank you, Kim, very much for doing it. And I do move to approve.
Okay, so there's a motion from Ms. Horn, a second from Mr. Kaufman-Gray. Any other discussion from TCC members on the minutes? Okay. So all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, one abstention from Mr. Bradley. All right, the minutes are adopted. So now we can open the joint meeting, and we'll have a roll call for the Neighborhood Advisory Council.
Okay. Committee Member Aldana. Present. Byrne. Foxen. Present. Green. Here. Kingston. Limon. Soto. Here. Trujillo. Here. Walters. Here. And Chair Pena. Vassallo. I'm sorry. Molina.
Great. Yeah, so I'm Hillary Blackerby, Chair of the Transportation Circulation Committee, and Teresa is Chair of the NAC, and so this is our first joint meeting. And I just wanted to go over a few things as we move into the meeting today. Just reminding folks that we are televised on Channel 18 right now, or whatever Cox Cable has decided they'll put us on. 18. Okay. And also streaming online. The video of the meeting will be available online as well after the fact, next week probably. And it also replays on City TV. So because we're on television, just want to remind you, if you're speaking into a microphone, to make sure that the green light is bright, because if you are not speaking into it, the people at home cannot hear you. And there's a little bit of amplification here in this room, so we want to make sure everybody can hear us well. The way that we're going to do this, since we just have one agenda item, the Milpas Pedestrian Improvements Report, we are going to have the staff report first, and then we will move into public comment. If there are committee members who have clarifying questions, so not a line of questioning to make a point, but just what did you mean when you said this, or something really, really clear for staff, a quick question, we can ask that at that time and then go to public comment. But all the committee members will have ample time to ask more questions and make commentary after public comment. So we want to make sure that everybody gets their time. So again, public comment is 2 minutes. I do have a timer, like I said, and we will be using it because all your neighbors want to speak too. So we want to respect everyone's time and sum it up in 2 minutes. And we know obviously it's a big issue and very emotional, but we want to try to get to as much substance as possible today. After public comment, then it'll come back to both the NAC, TCC for questions and comments. And if we move to a decision or motion or anything, that'll be appropriate at that time. The way that we're going to run it is, if once it comes back to the committees, if you want to speak, you have comments or questions, just get my attention. I'm going to keep a speakers list, and then we'll go in that order. If you have spoken already and you're raising your hand again, if there are other people who haven't spoken yet, we'll let them go first, and then we can do another round. But we just want to make sure everybody has their voice heard, both in the public and on the committees. I think that's it. yeah, we just want to be aware of everyone's time and not interrupt or anything. Another note for folks in the audience, and for those of you watching at home who can't see the audience, we have a full house in here. In order to keep decorum and keep moving forward, keep our momentum going with the meeting, there are no large applauses or cheers or anything like that, but there is a way that you can express your emotions, and it's something with technical term, it's called spirit fingers. So if you agree with something that's being said, you can go like this so we can test it out. If I can get spirit fingers from everyone. All right. Good. So we'll do that. It's silent, but it makes a statement. So we want to go ahead and do that so that we can keep to time. All right. So I don't know if
That's pretty much covered.
All right. Browning, if you want to introduce the staff report.
I'll go ahead and open this up. I'm Browning Allen, the Transportation Manager, Public Works Department. I manage the liaison to the Transportation and Circulation Committee. I have been before the Neighborhood Advisory Council a couple of times, so I think you all remember who I am. Tonight, in the audience with us, we have a few staff members. I think you all know Derek Bailey. He is our supervising transportation engineer. He will be making the bulk of the presentation. We also have Mike McGrew. He is a sergeant in the police department. He supervises the traffic enforcement detail in the police department. He will be here to answer any questions, as well as our city engineer, Pat Kelly. This is a Milpas item. We're doing a little different tonight. He has some drawings that he has put on the table for the audience information. It will be up on the screen here, so they'll be able to see what he's going over with the committee. Derek decided to do it this way so we can have bigger plans for the committee to take a look at. So when he's going through the presentation, we're probably just going to ask the committee members to crowd around so you can see what he's showing. If you feel comfortable with that, you can also turn around and watch it on the screen as well. Chair, you mentioned it. This is an emotional item. Yeah, you're right. It is an emotional item. What staff is responsible for doing, Derek is a licensed traffic engineer and professional engineer. He has to put forth his best professional recommendation in terms of ways to address a concern, in this case, pedestrian safety improvements on Milpas Street. We follow the manual on uniform traffic control devices. That's put out there so we deal with scientific engineering analysis and don't deal with emotions. So we have to put forth the best professional judgment. We let the city council either accept or not accept those recommendations. What we're asking for the committees to do tonight is hear what Derek has come up with in terms of options on Milpas Street, and give us your preferred option that we can take forward to the city council. I know there's been a lot of conversation about a traffic signal. Why can't we put one in? Well, there's, like mentioned earlier, we have the manual uniform traffic devices that we have to follow, and Derek's done the analysis and it doesn't meet those standards. So he professionally cannot recommend a traffic signal. That's why he's recommending other things. The council can reject his recommendation that goes in another direction, but we're asking both committees, if we were to go forward to the city council, which of these options would you like the city to move forward with? If the committee still wants to say a traffic signal, you can certainly do that, but we will also want you to weigh in on the options that Derek has put forward tonight. So I'm just kind of giving you a little framework before we start in the conversation tonight. I'm going to turn it over to Derek Bailey, and he's going to go over his various options he's come up with. Thank you. Derek, should go ahead. You going to start, Pat?
Good evening. Thank you, Browning. Derek and I are here tonight to summarize the investigation and analysis that we have done to improve pedestrian conditions on Milpas. The input from our prior meetings and from the community at large has been very helpful in identifying what options we can look at and help us make the recommendations that we will be presenting tonight. It has been a challenge to include everybody's input. We may not be able to reach the same final conclusion. However, we do understand the goal and also the passion to make Milpas safer, and as such, we have done our best to make recommendations tonight that we believe meet this goal. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Derek, our traffic engineer.
Thank you, Pat.
This evening I'm going to go through a number of options to improve pedestrian crossing conditions at both Milpas and Ortega Streets and Milpas and Yananali Streets. Just to give a quick background on how we got here, last October there was a very tragic accident. A young man, Sergio Romero, lost his life. After that, the city staff, Pat and I, we attended a few meetings last November. And since then, we've talked to a lot of different groups and committees and councils. Just to give a brief history of what's happened up till now. Last November, we went to a neighborhood advisory council meeting, as well as a Coast, Milpas Community Association, and Pueblo meeting. Those meetings, we were just there to listen. We were trying to get some feedback from the community, what people are after, and loud and clear, they want improved pedestrian crossing conditions at Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. The few months following November, up through the end of January, we came up with some alternatives, analyzed them, and at the January 26th Transportation Circulation Committee, we presented those initial set of alternatives. And since then, we've been meeting with various groups, presenting the alternatives, refining them, and getting feedback. And we're here tonight to present the alternatives that, based on the feedback we've been given, as well as our recommendation moving forward. The primary goals we've established here are to improve pedestrian safety, and more specifically pedestrian crossing conditions at Milpas and Ortega and at Milpas and Yananali. But at the same time, we want to maintain vehicular safety. We want it safe for everybody. So just to summarize it, improve crossing conditions, improve safety for pedestrians, and as well maintain safe conditions for vehicles. Other issues that we heard about in the outreach process, narrow lanes on Milpas, both traffic and parking lanes. Those narrow lanes are leading to difficult parking conditions. There's not a lot of space for bikes out there. There's narrow sidewalks, and as well, those narrow traffic lanes are leading to a lot of sideswipe crashes. One thing that we found is in the last 10 years, in the 3-block section between Coda and Canon Perdido, there's been 40 reported sideswipe crashes. And that doesn't include the crashes that don't go reported, knocked off side view mirrors, etc. So in our analysis, the first thing we looked at, because there was such a strong request for it, is our traffic signals. The benefit to traffic signals is it's easier for pedestrians to get across the street. But there's some trade-offs with traffic signals as well. Based on our experience operating other traffic signals up and down Milpas, we know that there's just as many pedestrian-involved crashes happening at signalized intersections as unsignalized intersections. So it wouldn't necessarily be an improvement. Wouldn't be any worse, but it wouldn't be an improvement. Where we're really likely to see a degradation in safety is in the vehicular crashes. And I really want to stress how many more crashes are happening at other signalized intersections on Milpas than at Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali. And I'm just going to run through the numbers here really quickly. This is since 2000. These are broadside collisions, vehicle-involved crashes. Canon Perdido, 8 crashes. De la Guerra, 8 crashes. Coda, 12. Haley, 18. Gutierrez, 25. Montecito, 20. Mason, 11. And 500, 11. Those are all the signalized intersections between the freeway and the neighborhood to the north. That's a total of 113 crashes. Those 113 crashes, there were 74 people injured. Now, just to compare with how many broadside collisions are happening at Milpas and Ortega and Milpas and Yananali, there was 1 at each since the year 2000. 2 people injured. So using this data, we can predict what's going to happen if a traffic signal is installed. There's going to be more broadside collisions and a higher potential for people to be injured, potentially fatal, and property damage. So those are the things we're trying to avoid, and for those reasons, traffic signals do not meet the goal of maintaining vehicular safety. as well as safety concerns with traffic signals. We know that traffic signals for low-volume streets are much less efficient. There's going to be more stops for people on Milpas. And along with more stops on Milpas, that can also push traffic into the neighborhoods if drivers get frustrated. Another thing that we're not recommending is to leave things the way they are. We know that the existing painted crosswalks and warning signs are not working. They're not creating gaps in traffic. They're not creating good driver yielding, and pedestrians are having a hard time getting across the street. So there's really no benefit to keeping things the way they are. The downside to keeping things the way they are, it gives pedestrians a false sense of security. Those pedestrians think they have the right-of-way, and they do, but they're not being given the right-of-way. So it's not creating safe crossing conditions for the pedestrians. And as well, like I said, there's a low rate of driver yielding to pedestrians. But we do have some alternatives that will improve pedestrian safety and some that will improve pedestrian mobility as well. The first one is we could remove the painted crosswalks. We really have to ask whether or not it's an appropriate location to have marked crosswalks. The thing that would do is remove the false sense of security for pedestrians, and as well it would encourage them to cross at other locations. Another thing we could do is relocate or remove the bus stop on the northwest corner of, or northeast corner, pardon me, of Milpas and Ortega. That's a northbound bus stop. The nearest bus stop to this is 1 block north at De La Guerra. This bus stop is an attraction for pedestrians. If somebody's on this side of the street and they want to cross, this is how they do it to get to that bus stop. Removing that bus stop removes the likelihood that pedestrians will cross here. But what we are hearing is this is a location that people do want to cross. So if there is going to be people crossing here, we want to enhance this crosswalk. We don't want to leave it the way it is. We're going to show a short video here. All of our alternatives that we're presenting tonight include pedestrian-activated flashing lights. And this is the kind of light that we're recommending. This is called a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. This was taken in Berkeley, California. They were recently approved for use in the state of California. They've had a really good success rate of driver yielding in the 80 to 90% range, which is really good. Some of the other types of pedestrian-activated flashers, such as the in-pavement lights, and as well just the pulsing amber beacons, they have driver yielding rates down in the 30 to 50% range. So this is much better, and we think it would be quite effective. The first alternative, there's two variations of it, is to, this is at Ortega, is to install a median refuge island. This is a median refuge island. The advantage of median refuge islands is that it gives the pedestrian an opportunity to cross half the street at a time. Currently, because there's a center turn lane here, there's really no good place for the pedestrian to wait in the middle of the road because there could be a left turner there. So the pedestrian has to find a really large gap in traffic in order to make it all the way across the street. Having a median refuge island, like I said, allows the pedestrian to cross halfway at a time, and that way they can analyze one direction of traffic, cross, analyze the other direction of traffic. A second benefit to this is it gives us a place to install the rectangular rapid flashing beacons in the video we just showed. Installing the rectangular rapid flashing beacons only on the sides of the road may not be noticeable by drivers. Milpas is a wide street, and having those flashers only at the side of the road may be too far outside of the driver's cone of vision and may not be as noticeable. By having a third device in the middle of the road, it would be very noticeable by drivers and much more likely to increase driver yielding rates. This configuration that I'm showing here involves a median refuge island that's split in two. And that way, when the pedestrian crosses the street, They're actually standing in between separate pieces of the median. The pedestrian will feel more comfortable out in the middle of the street. That would require us to build ramps here and here. A trade-off for this configuration is this ramp is right in the middle of the bus stop and would require the bus stop to be removed. As well, with this configuration, in order to fit a median refuge island in the middle of the street, requires us to push the traffic lanes closer to the curb, where the parking aisle is right now. And that would require us to add some red curb in these spaces here. So it would involve loss of parking. We've been hearing from the business owners that they do use that on-street parking. It's important for their customers, for deliveries, and for their employees. So based on the comments we've heard so far, there isn't a lot of support from the merchants for this alternative, or alternatives that involve loss of parking. Another variation of the median refuge island is making use of the existing ramps and leaving the crosswalk where it is. It's a shorter median refuge island, and the pedestrian would actually stand at the end of the island, so the pedestrian would be exposed on one side. Again, it is a place for the pedestrian to wait in the middle of the street. It is a place for us to install that third flashing device, and because this median refuge island is a little bit shorter, there'd be less new red curb needed, and we wouldn't have to eliminate as much on-street parking. These next alternatives, they're variations of one another, but they all involve removing one lane of traffic at Ortega Street. Traffic volumes are such between Coda and Canon Perdido that we could remove one traffic lane and not negatively impact traffic too terribly much. We would add a bike lane and wider traffic lanes and wider parking aisles. So the benefits are there's space for bikes, there'd be less sideswipe crashes, and as well, by eliminating one traffic lane, there's fewer lanes for the pedestrian to cross, so easier pedestrian crossings. That being said, Milpas still is a busy street, and we could and we should make pedestrian crossings easier. The restriping concept itself isn't enough. So what I'm showing here is a median refuge island in addition to the restriping. And again, that gives the pedestrian an opportunity to cross halfway and a location for a third set of flashers. The restriping, it would cause some congestion. That would be most noticeable at De La Guerra Street. Just to give everybody a feel for the type of traffic volumes that we're talking about, north of Canon Perdido, which is here. This is the neighborhood to the north. The road actually existing right now narrows down to one lane in each direction. There's about 8,000 cars a day use this section of Milpas just north of Canon Perdido. Once we get south of Canon Perdido, that's when traffic volumes really start to jump. South of Canon Perdido is 13,000 vehicles per day. And then once we get to Ortega, it's about 15,000. And south of Coda, 17,000. And then once we're south of Haley, it's over 20,000. This striping configuration works around 15,000. Once you get much more above that, that's when backups can start happening. Like I said, it would be most noticeable at De La Guerra. What people would notice during red lights is longer queues. However, they would still clear the light in one traffic signal cycle. In contrast to the south, it would take multiple signal cycles for drivers to get through if that striping configuration were extended further south. Another variation of this, we were asked by the Transportation Circulation Committee to show this alternative when we were here in January, is to show it with curb extensions. These are the curb extensions here. what curb extensions do is it creates a shorter pedestrian crossing distance. So right now, Milpas Street is 64 feet wide. Curb extensions would reduce that crossing distance to somewhere around 48 to 50 feet, depending on how wide those curb extensions would be. As well, the flashing devices would extend further out into the street, closer to the driver's center of the cone of vision, and we wouldn't require a third set of flashers. The reason I'm showing the curb extension on the south side of the street is not to affect the bus stop. A curb extension on this northeast corner wouldn't give the bus enough room to pull parallel into the curb and pick up passengers. And another alternative that we were asked to show by the Transportation Circulation Committee back in January was a combination of curb extensions and a median refuge island. Again, showing the curb extensions on the south side so as not to affect the bus stop. One issue we could potentially run into with this configuration is enough space here between the median refuge island and the curb extension for the fire department. They do like to have 20 feet clear so they won't ever get obstructed and they can respond to their emergencies in a timely manner. This would probably be somewhere around 16 to 18 feet as shown. So if this was an alternative put forth, we would have to look at that particular spot right there. Oh, I should also mention, parking would not be negatively impacted with the restriping configuration, and we may actually be able to reintroduce one or two spots because of improved sight lines associated with the restriping. Because we did hear quite strongly that on-street parking matters, we came up with another alternative since the Transportation Circulation Committee back in January. And that's just an overhead mounted flashing light. Again, that addresses the concern that the side-mounted flashers would be too far outside of the driver's cone of vision and get something up over the road. It would be pedestrian activated. It wouldn't alter the roadway striping configuration, so it'd still be 2 lanes in each direction. None of the turning movements would be affected, and as well, none of the parking would be affected. And those are the alternatives for Ortega. At Yan and Ollie, like I mentioned, the traffic volumes are substantially higher than they are at Ortega on Milpas. They're somewhere in the 22,000 range, so almost 50% higher than at Ortega. Again, we need to ask the question, is this an appropriate location for a crosswalk? So one alternative is to remove the crosswalk, encourage pedestrians to cross elsewhere, and remove that false sense of security. It would still be a legal crossing point. However, without the crosswalk there, pedestrians would likely not have that false sense of security. As well, the bus stop at Yan and Ollie is a southbound bus stop, and it's what we refer to as a near side bus stop, so it stops on the near side of the intersection. The issue with near side bus stops at unsignalized intersections is they create visibility problems. So if there is a bus stopped here, a pedestrian on this corner wanting to cross the street, their sight lines are obstructed by the bus. Similar to Ortega, we could do a median refuge island. Because of driveways, fire hydrants, streetlights, there isn't the opportunity to have the other design alternative with the median refuge island where the pedestrian actually passes through the center of the island. We could only do this type of configuration. But again, pedestrian would have a waiting spot at the center of the road, and it is a spot for a third pedestrian-activated flashing device. The negatives for this configuration is the loss of parking. A number of spots would have to be eliminated in order to fit the median refuge island. As well, eastbound to southbound left turns out of the donut shop driveway wouldn't be possible, although during most times of the day, that's a really difficult movement to make anyway. It'd only be during off hours that movement would even be possible. And again, to address the concerns of loss of parking, we could also do an overhead mounted flashing device at this location as well. It wouldn't affect parking. It wouldn't affect capacity in any way. And those are the alternatives for Yananali. Staff recommendations at Milpas and Ortega. There are two feasible options in our mind. The overhead mounting flashers, number two, would work. It would create gaps for pedestrians to use. It would create improved opportunities for pedestrians to get across the street and improve driver yielding and improve safety. So that is a feasible option. As well, any of the alternatives that involve the neighborhood striping transition are also feasible. They would all work quite well, create good crossing conditions for pedestrians, as well as address some of the other issues that we heard about, such as lack of space for bikes, sideswipe crashes, and difficult parking maneuvers. At Yananali, again, because the traffic volumes are higher, we don't have that opportunity to restripe the road without creating a significant amount of congestion. And due to the concerns of the businesses over loss of parking, we're recommending the overhead mounted flashing lights at that location. So next steps. This evening, we're looking for a recommendation from the Transportation Circulation Committee, a recommendation from the Neighborhood Advisory Council, and as well, in about a week and a half's time, we're going to be presenting to the Youth Council as well. And in May, we're planning on taking our recommendations, your recommendations, the Youth Council's recommendations, plus all the feedback we've received from the community to City Council. Thank you.
Okay. So
yes, if I may, just to reach a short conclusion, is that Derek and I have been looking at what is the larger goal that we're trying to achieve here, and our assignment, our duty and responsibility to the city and to the City Council is to provide them with what we believe is, and what I understand the interest of the community at large is, how can we make Milpas safer? And as difficult as it has been for us and for many others, is that we are not recommending the traffic signal as noted. There's been a significant amount of discussion is that the reason why we're not recommending the traffic signal is because it doesn't meet warrants. And that was this magic formula of that determines whether or not a traffic signal can be installed. I went on the internet and looked up traffic signal warrants and ran across a traffic signal warrant summary. It is 11 pages long. So that's one heck of a summary. So it gives you a clue as that, you know, it's not simple. But I think what I'll try to do is try to reduce it down to that this is just a tool. And it's a reflection of what is the key goal that we're trying to achieve here. Derek described as that a traffic signal will have no improvement to pedestrian statistics, much in the same way that you can predict that there's going to be a rush hour tomorrow. I think we can generally predict that we'll have the same amount of pedestrian traffic interface that we had at an intersection without a traffic signal as one with. But the staggering statistic is one that Derek came up today, is that there's be a significant amount of more vehicular accidents, a reduction in safety. And so that doesn't make Milpas any safer. Another key item is also, and you can predict that just like a rush hour. Another key thing is that by adding a traffic signal, in a sense, you're providing resistance to the flow. Much in the same way you take a pipe with a certain amount of flow through it, you add some resistance to it, less water goes through it. And where does it go? It goes to the other pipes parallel to it. And so that is why we are not recommending a traffic signal. And one of the, we can get into all of the questions regarding well, gee, if you build a traffic signal, this is some of the comments we received. Well, part of the discussion had been warrants or statistics that justify a traffic signal. One of them is that you have sufficient vehicles, you have sufficient pedestrians to come to the intersection, and if they're there, that can warrant or justify a traffic signal. Well, even if that could be true, that we put a traffic signal there, and the comments had been, well, it's not safe right now, or people are worried about it, so they don't cross there, they don't drive there. Well, even if we put a traffic signal there, you still would have the same issue about pedestrian safety we just talked about, and the same about vehicular safety. So warrants really aren't the issue at hand here. Is that what is the bigger picture of how we can provide safety to the intersection? So I was just trying to answer a couple questions because I anticipate they will be coming up later. And of course, Derek and I will be available for any questions. Another key question came up is that one of the reasons why we may not be recommending a traffic signal is because they're very expensive. We've talked about it at some of our public meetings. They could be anywhere between $150,000 to $250,000 each. That's a significant amount of money. However, we do have a good streets capital program, $2 to $3 million a year. Now, we have projects funded within that amount of money, and actually, as a matter of fact, we don't think that's enough money to do all the pavement maintenance and other policy and practices that the city has created to create more lights in neighborhoods, to construct new handicap ramps, to construct sidewalk links. So it's a small pot of funding when you consider all the needs. However, that's still a significant amount of money. Money is not what is determining our decision here. We can program that level of money over several years. It's not uncommon that we have emergencies that come up that we have to divert money away from typical maintenance. Classic is the Conejo Slides. We have a road in the Sycamore Canyon area that is sliding down the hill. Well, it's very expensive for us to maintain the connection to the neighborhood by maintaining that road, but we have to do it. If we need to install a traffic signal, there is funding to do it. Funding is not the determinant as to whether or not we are recommending this, whether we have a traffic signal or not. So I hope that anticipates some of the questions. I am sure it hasn't. And Derek and I will be available for any questions from the public. Thank you.
Okay, great. So unless there are any brief clarifying questions to staff from committee members, then we will go to public comment. If you wish to speak and you haven't turned in your slip, they're over here, that table, and you can fill those out and give them to someone on the end, and they'll pass them in. You can see we have a pretty significant stack, so just reminding you, the timer, 2 minutes, and we will be moving through these. So I'll say the name of the person and then the next person, so you can be ready to come up when the person in front of you finishes. So first we have Robert Bernstein, to be followed by Rose Aldana.
So do I need to push something? Oh, okay, sorry. Back in 1998, I was on the Downtown Waterfront Vision Committee, and we read these historic documents, and one of them was a Milpas Vision Committee document that talked about wide sidewalks, bike lanes, and planted medians. That was from 1980, and none of that was fulfilled. So you might want to go back and find out what happened to that. So 10 years ago, I was crossing a similar road with 2 lanes in each direction. A car stopped for me, and then I started to cross, and the car in the next lane over hit me. And so the problem with having flashing signals or crosswalks is that doesn't work when you have 2 lanes in each direction. So if you're going to do just a flashing signal and not an actual traffic signal, you're going to have to narrow it to one lane in each direction. That's crucial. And you've got to put bike lanes in there. And then the question I always like to ask is, if we currently had the wide sidewalks, the bike lanes, and the planted medians, would anyone support removing them? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So Rose Aldana to be followed by Jarrett Gorin.
Hi, I'm Rose Aldana, and starting November 1 of 2011, we started a petition. We have over 500 signatures of area residents to Milpas and business owners requesting signal lights, which we've been discussing today. So this was November 1st when we started the petition. It was handed to City Council on November 20th. The recommendation, or what we're asking for, are signal lights at both Ortega and Yananali streets with timers. And I've also asked that the speed be reduced by 5 miles an hour to 25, just like Haley Street, the speed is a 25 mile an hour speed limit. Perhaps that would help to reduce rear-end accidents. However, I've been told that that can't be done. So, but it's a suggestion that I had to help with the rear-end traffic matters. But I guess in closing, if we have consistent lighting pattern, creates a consistent driving pattern for a safer Milpas Street. And I'm asking that all reports be submitted by staff that need to be in, all documentation be provided before all boards make their final decision. Thank you.
Jarrett Gorin to be followed by Sonia Harris.
Hi, good evening. I'm Jarrett Gorin. I'm a resident in the Milpas area. I'm here just speaking on behalf of my family tonight, but I would also disclose that I'm a board member of the Milpas Community Association as well. And I also wanted to thank the transportation staff. They work hard. They do a difficult job. I think they did an excellent job putting together this information packet, which it really digests down a lot of complicated issues so that they're easy to understand, and I definitely appreciate the work that you guys have done. One of the things that I'm perplexed over here is how this issue is it's becoming a little bit adversarial, or at least in some of the articles I've read. I think, we all want the same thing. We want a safer environment for pedestrians on Milpas Street. And, just because we may have different opinions of what that means doesn't mean we have to call each other sore losers in the newspaper and everything. I think we all have similar goals, and we need to be able to engage in a good discussion about how we do it. So how do we do that? I categorically am opposed to this idea of removing crosswalks. I think that it goes against some other policies we have in the city, which are really geared towards enhancing pedestrian environments. The pedestrian master plan, when I hear removing bus stops and crosswalks to get rid of a problem, it just seems to go against a lot of other things that I've had a lot of personal involvement with on other projects. So I don't support that. As the Ortega intersection, I think that 3B is a really good option. It's a subtle, but I think would be a very effective improvement, primarily because of the reduction to 2 lanes. I think above anything else, when you reduce the width of that roadway, it will slow traffic down. And I think everybody knows that when you slow traffic down, the cars have more time to react to pedestrians. They have more time to see pedestrians. And if, God forbid, somebody hits a pedestrian, they will be going a lot slower. And that pedestrian is more likely to survive. I also...
Time's up, so...
That's really all I got to say. Yen and Alley, I think we need a signal, but I'll leave others to say that.
Okay. All right. Very good spirit fingers, everybody. Okay, so Sonia Harris to be followed by Ralph Fertig. Sonia had to leave. Okay. Sonia left, so Ralph Fertig to be followed by Christine Bourgeois.
Chair Blackerby, Chair Pena, and members of the committee and council. I'm Ralph Fertig. For over 30 years, I've lived on the east side, where I biked, walked, and driven just about everywhere. I don't like driving on Milpas. It's busy and distracting. When I do, I move away from the outside lane because I can be slowed by parking cars, opening car doors, stopped buses, and bicyclists taking the lane. Others do the same, resulting in twice as many cars on the inside lane rather than the outside lanes. The point is that removing the outside lanes won't make much difference, but it will greatly improve the safety of everybody because there are fewer lanes for pedestrians to cross, there's room for bike lanes, buses stopping won't be blocking traffic, and there are possibly wider sidewalks. That is great beneficial change that I recommend between Canon Perdido and Kokoda. It's also one of the city staff's 2 recommendations. For Ortega, I further recommend adding curb extensions that will further decrease the crossing distance and enhance motorist to pedestrian visibility. If those 2 safety measures don't help enough, consider other improvements later on. For Yananali and Milpas, the situation is different because there's a lot more traffic, so 2 lanes can't be removed. However, 2 things can be done there that will greatly improve safety, adding flashing lights and a center median. The city staff recommends the lights. I would add the center median. Reason comes from a large 2005 Federal Highway Administration report on crosswalks. It says that installing raised medians provides significantly lower pedestrian crash rates on multi-lane roads. A painted median won't make any difference, but a raised one does. Thank you very much.
Oops, sorry. Christine Bourgeois to be followed by Viviana Rodriguez.
Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I'm Christine Bourgeois. I'm the education coordinator for the Bicycle Coalition, but I'm coming here to speak as an experienced bicyclist. I ride my bike every day and almost everywhere. I spend a lot of time on the east side because of my job. I spend a lot of time at BC Central. I work with the students at Santa Barbara Junior High, at Santa Barbara High School, Franklin School, all around the schools. This is not a very safe area. Whenever I have to ride my bike on Milpas, I don't feel safe, and I'm very experienced, and I rode all over the world. The 4 lanes are narrow, traffic is heavy and fast, and the shadows on the road are not very visible, and many drivers don't know what they are about. When I take the lane, which is my right, cars honk at me. So I support restriping, or the road diet, another way to say it, having 2 traffic lines instead of 4 with bike lane will make Milpas safer for all road users, pedestrians, bikers, and drivers too. It was recently done on Cliff Drive where I live, and it has been a great success for the Mesa. I ride on Cliff Drive every day now, and I feel safe. Thank you.
All right, Viviana Rodriguez, followed by Carmen Lozano.
Thank you for letting me speak before you tonight. My name is Viviana Rodriguez. I am a junior at Santa Barbara High School. I belong to a cheerleading team and a member of the Don's Net Cafe. Recently, I met a woman by the name of Christine Bourgeois that visited the Don's Net Cafe, and she told me of her story of ways the city would like to change Milpas, and I felt I needed to be a part of it. My concern here today is to voice my opinion along with 1,300 students and teachers that signed my petition that we all want change to our Milpas. I have been open to everyone's opinions, but I feel as a community, we all have more work to do to make our Milpas safer. As a student, I regularly walk along Milpas and will not attempt to cross the intersection where Sergio Romero lost his young life. So if you ask me, yes, I am scared. I have spoken to my classmates, teachers, and everyday pedestrians along Milpas, and they are scared. Recently, I have noticed more police activity along Milpas, stopping cars for speeding or cutting off pedestrians and crosswalks, but I feel it's still not enough. I have read the recommendations from our city engineers about the intersection at Ortega and Milpas Street and see that they have studied the ideas of median island and pedestrian activated lighting. I feel this would work and bring speeding drivers to slow down in the area and protect from losing young lives like Sergio Romero. I am also supportive of the road diet for Milpas Street from 4 lanes to 2 lanes and bike lanes. I also ask if this intersection can be made a school zone since it is so close to Santa Barbara Junior High soccer field where there is unlocked gates, and I see students walking through there in morning and after school. My goal until something is completed at this intersection is to continue to support the concerns of all that feel unsafe by continuing to get more petitions, creating a Milpas protest, volunteers with stop signs at this intersection, and getting local officials and community members involved. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next. Oh, thank you. So we have a petition here. Carmen Lozano, to be followed by Sylvia Mendoza.
Good evening. My name is Carmen Lozano, and I am the chair of the Spanish Language Outreach Committee for the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition. For the last 2 years, I and other volunteers had been reaching out to the Spanish-speaking bicyclist community on the east side, surveying their needs, doing direct outreach, and providing safety education right on Milpas. During the last month of November, we surveyed a sample of 50 bicyclists on Milpas Street and learned that the typical bicyclist traveling on Milpas Street is a monolingual, Spanish-speaking Latino male who uses the bicycle as his primary mode of transportation to commute to work. We also learned that most bicyclists traveling on Milpas Street ride on the sidewalks intentionally, even though they know this is unsafe and against the law. But fear to share the road with cars moving at very fast speeds forces them to engage in unsafe behavior. Many of them reported that they had been stopped by the police and ticketed for this. However, facing economic loss of having to pay a fine was less important than being hit or injured. In the latest citywide cyclist count, the highest number of bicyclists riding on the sidewalks was found in Milpas, 55%. For these reasons, on behalf of the Santa Barbara Bicycle Coalition Spanish Language Outreach Committee, and in representation of the Spanish-speaking bicycling community voice from the east side, we support the road diets, AAK, the neighborhood transition striping, because it will prevent speeding, it will provide easier pedestrian crossing, and widen parking at road lanes that are too narrow. The right striping will allow for bike lanes on 3 critical blocks of Milpas adjacent to the junior high and high school. Having bike lanes of Milpas will increase safety for all. And ultimately, we hope that we don't have tragic events like the one that claimed Sergio's life. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Sylvia Mendoza, to be followed by Carmen Ponce.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. My name is Sylvia Mendoza, and I was actually involved with Latino Democrats with Olivia Uribe. We've been going over 2 weekends and over to the community, speaking to everybody that lives around that area, Ortega and Milpas and Yanunali and Milpas area. And so what I'm here for today is actually to speak for these people that are actually Spanish speaking, and what I found from them is that they are actually they're afraid because they don't speak the language, of course. They feel like they're not heard, and they supported very much a traffic light. And I think we are all intelligent people here, and I understand, the amount of time and, effort that you have been taking to, bring up, good information, good ideas for this. But from a lot of the people that I spoke to, they would really like to have a traffic light, and that the reason is because they feel that people would respect that more than just having flashing lights, because for some people they can see it, but for others they wouldn't. So I just wanted to speak out for the community and for myself, because I do live on the east side. My daughter goes to Santa Barbara Junior High, and I feel that it's important and to live in a secure and a safe place. I have been noticing more police activity, and I thank you, Officer McGrew, for that. And it just makes more of an awareness, but I think it also is an education for a lot of the community. So I would feel that if we could, just somehow come together and listen to the people, basically. Thank you.
Thank you. Carmen Ponce, to be followed by Eva Enbar. Carmen? Oh, okay, great.
Buenas noches. Mi nombre es Carmen Ponce. Perdón.
Un momento.
Okay.
My apologies. Perdón.
No hay problema.
Adelante, señora.
Okay. Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Mi nombre es Carmen Ponce.
My name is Carmen Ponce.
Soy residente de la área de Milpas por más de 50 años.
I'm a resident of the Milpas area for over 50 years.
Ajá, yo tengo que cruzar calle Milpas para los negocios que están al cruzar.
I have to cross Milpas Street because of the businesses that are in the other side of Milpas.
Pero ya es un temor cruzar la calle,
But I'm afraid now to cross the street.
porque he estado a ese punto de golpearme con los carros más de 3 veces
More than 3 times I'm always being run over by a car
cuando tengo luz verde.
when I have a green light.
Es un pánico cruzar esa calle.
It's a panic to cross the street. I hope
Espero que cuando el tráfico no sea pesado tratar de cruzar la calle,
when the traffic is not heavy, I try to cross the street.
pero no hay ninguna seguridad porque la velocidad es muy alta,
The speed is too high.
demasiado alta.
Too high.
Ya es hora
It's about time
de que pongan semáforos
that you put traffic lights
en la esquina de Ortega y calle Milpas,
of Milpas and Ortega,
y también en Yaronali y
and
Milpas.
also in Yanonali and Milpas.
No esperen a que haya una muerte más
Don't wait for another death
por la velocidad que se corre en la calle Milpas.
because of the speed that takes place in Milpas.
Reducir la velocidad es muy importante.
To reduce that speed is very important.
Necesitamos semáforos.
We need traffic lights.
Por favor,
Please
instalen semáforos.
install traffic lights.
Por favor.
Please.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias. Eva Inbar, to be followed by Lito Garcia.
Good evening. My name is Eva Inbar. I'm with Coast. Coast has been working with East Side residents for over a year on safety problems, pedestrian safety problems in the East Side, and we've been following the process on Milpas closely. We appreciate the city staff for their presentation and their work on this. They've come up with some good alternatives. We are very much in favor of the road diet north of Coda. We think that is a good thing. It'll provide many benefits. It'll make pedestrian crossings safer. It'll enable us to have bike lanes. It'll slow traffic. That is a good thing. So we support that wholeheartedly. At Yanonali, we have a problem. That crossing is more difficult to make. If we cannot have a traffic signal here, as most people want, then we at least need the flashing beacons with the refuge island. And that is so important. As Ralph Fertig pointed out, that is supported by the Federal Highway Administration as a proven safety countermeasure. It's one of only 3 that they support. And to have that in there makes a big difference. I was disappointed to see that the final staff recommendation did not include that, because it would mean losing some parking spots. If indeed safety is the goal here, as has been stated again and again, then we have to have that refuge island, and a handful of parking spots is a small sacrifice to make. I'm asking your help here to bring back those refuge islands into the plan. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eva. Next, Lito Garcia, to be followed by Maria Amezquita.
Good evening, Lito Garcia. I'm the principal of Santa Barbara Junior High. One of my charges is to ensure that all 840 of my students are safe day in and day out, and I believe that we do that at school. But also, I must know that my kids are able to arrive safely and leave safely every single day. And so that's why I'm here tonight. And I'm in favor of item 3B and 3C. I think those are very viable options that will ensure the safety of my students as they choose to cross Milpas. Related to Yanonali, I believe that an island is necessary. If we're showing that at Ortega and Milpas, it will provide a safe avenue for pedestrians, I believe then we must repeat it again down on Lower Milpas. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria Amezquita, to be followed by Alan Bleeker. Maria Amezquita. Okay. think she left. So Alan Bleeker to be followed by Angel Gonzalez.
Good evening. My name is Alan Bleeker, president of the Milpas Community Association, and also a business owner and property owner at the corner of Milpas and Ortega. Milpas is a busy commercial corridor with a major highway interchange surrounded by 3 major schools, established residential neighborhoods, and community organizations that serve major portions of the population. There is no other corridor like it in this city. The street sees multiple uses from these different segments of the community, and whatever solutions we implement on Milpas Street must respect the rights and needs of these various stakeholders. First and foremost, we feel that stoplights are the most appropriate solution for both intersections. The street speaks a dominant language of stoplights in that 8 of the 10 intersections north of the freeway have them. Only Yananali and Ortega do not fit that vernacular, and both are school crossings, completely unprotected. Let's be honest, drivers are trained to stop for a red light. Our neighborhood is struggling with why some device with a red light, even if only in use when pedestrian activated, is not an offer. We are aware the city has installed traffic lights even if not warranted under state guidelines. The precedents for this are at Cabrillo and State Street. The city asserts that it will face liability if it proceeds this way. To that we respond, the city is having tunnel vision on liability. You're already liable. The neighborhood asked for lights at these intersections for years through the Franklin Advisory Committee. Sergio Romero was tragically killed there, Mrs. Rodriguez before him. Now there is suddenly movement. The city could face a lawsuit because nothing was done until now. Post-implementation, if another pedestrian gets hurt, someone could sue if a signal light could have prevented this accident. We've reviewed the city's proposals at length, and this is our position for each intersection. At Ortega, Solution 3B with road diet and curb extensions is most acceptable to neighbors. It increases safety and preserves on-street parking.
Mr. Bleeker, just wrap up because your time's up.
Thank you.
Thanks.
At Yananali, the neighborhood does not find the proposed solutions acceptable. The traffic volumes are higher and people are less willing to stop. The city's solution breaks street continuity. We believe that signal lights are warranted in this place.
Okay, thank you.
Finally, this work on Milpas must start a long-term
Just trying
plan
to
for this
keep-
street. Thank you.
Keep to 2 minutes. All right. So next, Angel Gonzalez to be, unless there's another Alan Bleeker, I'll take that one out. What does that say? Santos Guzman. So Angel Gonzalez followed by Santos Guzman. Angel?
So 3 of us are going to be speaking right now. So it's like me, then them 2.
Okay.
All right, so I'm a current resident in the Milpas area, and I'm here on behalf of the stoplights on Milpas Street, and we need them because last time, like a week ago I think it was, some lady got mad at me because I was crossing the street, and like she didn't see me, I guess, and like as I was crossing the street, she got mad because I beat her to the cross, and like she called me an idiot, and I was like, come on now, you can't tell me that. I'm a kid. You're an old woman, and you're over here coming at me, calling me an idiot because I beat you to walk the street, and she got mad. So, like, I think we really need those stoplights because, like, that's, like, BS. Yeah.
Okay. You can just tell us your name?
I'm Angel Gonzalez.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm a current student at Santa Barbara Junior High. I'm in 8th grade, and we feel that stoplights are needed because one morning, me and my friend were walking home. It was walking to school, sorry. It was a late start, and when we were trying to cross the street, there was a large car on the right lane, and on the left lane, when we were already walking, the car, I guess, didn't see us, and he almost hit my friend, and I pulled him back, and then because I saw it behind, and I saw that he wasn't slowing down, so I pulled him back, and the car, it didn't even stop. He just passed back. And, yeah, he was going, pretty fast. And that's it.
Thank you. Your name?
Angel Velasquez.
Okay.
Me and my friend almost got hit a couple of times, and we don't want it to happen again. And we don't want to get hit and killed just the way Sergio Romero did. and I think that all students at Santa Barbara Junior High should be safe just as we should.
Thank you. All right, so Santos Guzman.
Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Mi nombre es Santos Guzmán
My name is Santos Guzman.
y tengo un negocio en el 129 de la Norte
I
Milpas.
have a business on 129 North Milpas.
Y solamente quiero platicarles mis experiencias sobre 16 años que tengo ahí.
I just would like to tell you what my experience has been over 16 years that I have been there.
He mirado mucha gente cuando cruza allí el cruce de la Milpas y Yanonali,
I have seen lots of people when they make the crossing there in Milpas and Yanonali.
que casi las golpean
They almost get run over
en varias ocasiones.
several occasions.
Y durante todo ese tiempo
During all that time,
tengo la experiencia de platicarles que yo pienso que los de la ciudad no han visto lo que yo he visto.
I have the experience, and that's what I'm telling you. I think the people from the city have not seen what I have seen.
Y he estado ese crucero tan peligroso
That crossing is so dangerous.
que varias veces
Several times,
ha tenido que cruzar mi esposa
my wife had to cross.
acompañada. Tengo que salirme de la taquería para
I have to
acompañarla
leave my taxi
para
stand to go accompany my wife.
y muchas de mis hijas
Many of my daughters,
también han tenido problemas, pero no nomás mis hijas,
also have
mucha
problems.
gente,
Not only my daughters, lots of people.
mucha gente que necesita cruzar para ir
needs to cross,
al restaurante,
go to the restaurant,
no tiene acceso a una
have
luz.
access to a light.
Yo pienso que si ponen un crucero de peatones,
A pedestrian crossing,
va a ser lo mismo,
it's going to be the same thing.
por la experiencia que yo tengo.
That's to the experience
Lo que yo he mirado allí
that I have
durante
seen
16 años.
16 years.
Y muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Gracias. Next is Olivia Uribe, to be followed by Silvia Uribe. Olivia? Stuck in the back. It's hard when a room is this full to get through from the middle of the row.
Hi, my name is Olivia Uribe, and I'm a member of the Latino Democrats. One of the things that we noticed a lot in having these discussions is that a lot of the times people that we spoke with are not understanding why we can't have streetlights, and saying that they don't understand, but in the staff or knows better is the wrong answer to the community. So until it can be clarified to where the community can understand it, I think that's an issue. We're here to address two intersections that have been an issue for a long time. It's not a new issue, and the accident that happened could have been prevented. And in fact, you had Milpa's revitalization plans a long time ago. They were just not prioritized. Instead, discussions of realigning State Street benches and completely odd projects are prioritized and drive the conversations of Santa Barbara. The community is here because they're asking for an immediate solution to a long-term existing problem. And even though there is a complex issue of the state and federal warrants, the ultimate decision comes down to the city, and they have discrepancy. And Mr. Bleeker correctly addressed the possibility of liability existing at different places. And in fact, the city of San Diego last year had to settle a wrongful death lawsuit for $1.8 million because they wouldn't install or address an intersection that the community had asked about for a long time. And so the Latino Democrats are supporting the two stoplights at both intersections and prioritizing the Milpas corridor. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Silvia Uribe. I'm the chair of the Latino Democrats of Santa Barbara County. We organized over a year ago with a mission that includes empowering and better preparing Latinos to participate in local politics. We also support and campaign for initiatives that will benefit the Latino community and the community at large. We got involved in this process because after attending several early community meetings, we found out that the organizations involved, nor the city, reached out to the area residents. They reached out to businesses and to the community at large in general, but not necessarily the area residents. Our strength is in talking with and listening to people, and we did it. On 2 separate Saturdays, the Latina members talked with neighbors who live closest to the intersections being discussed. And we have a map of those for anyone to look at it if they want. And I can pass it around. Oh, sorry. We spoke with 103 neighbors and found that 46% use the intersections daily for the following activities in order of recurrence: shopping, walking, school, work, other activities. 34% of those we spoke with especially avoid the intersections because these are dangerous, which addresses the not enough people walking around the area. So that could be the reason. Of all the people we talk with, 74% of the people in the area support a stoplight. We informed the public about all the proposals being discussed today, and the highest preferred solution, in addition to the street lights, only 23% supported it, was the median refuge with flashing lights. Given the overwhelming support for the traffic signals that we're requesting that the community be addressed, that the committees will further consider the installment of traffic lights at each intersection. We like to see a cost comparison of all the options presented. We want to stress the lower pedestrian traffic count is not due to lack of necessity, but rather real and perceived dangers. And lastly, we'd like to note that while many people attended the first 2 community meetings, the city was responsive at that time, and no adequate community outreach has occurred since then with neighbors that are not property or business owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, Sharon Byrne to be followed by, says 2 people. One is Nancy Earl, and the other one is someone else. Neil or Nell Egan?
They had to go.
Sure.
Tonight, I'm in front of you as the Executive Director of the Milpas Community Association, which is why I'm on this side of the podium. I want to say a couple of things. One is I appreciate the explanations of how the engineers pointed out that there are a lot more crashes at signalized intersections. And I believe in one of our last meetings, Sally Kingston quipped, well, if there's so many crashes because of signal lights, let's just pull all the signal lights out. It makes very little sense. The neighborhood is justly and rightly asking for something that seems normal at the other 8 out of 10 intersections on Milpas. Thanks to Helene Schneider, who's in the room tonight, sending me on an errand to ask for federal and state assistance on this matter, I contacted the FHA, Federal Highway Administration, and I talked to the program manager over intersections, and he's out of Chicago. He let me know that there is possibly a solution called a hawk beacon that actually turns red. And maybe we could look at that for Yen and Ellie Street as something that would actually work on stopping the cars. I think one of the big concerns the neighbors have around Yen and Ellie Street is they're just not going to stop for a flashing yellow light when they stop for everything else. There's an SBPD officer in the room. He can probably confirm that people stop more for red lights than they do for anything else. Be my sense anyway. Second thing is that they also recommended something else that I think is important too, and that is an independent road safety audit. That's where federal highway officials, Caltrans engineers who are all familiar with the warrants and the codes will come in and take a long-term look at your street. And yes, maybe a flashing yellow light works today, but those same engineers might tell you, you know what, in 2 years you're going to have to put in a signal light anyway because your traffic volumes are projected to increase. The nice thing about that is it's independent, it's non-biased, and it would give us something that the neighborhood has also been asking for, which is a long-term plan for the street. So I would like to advocate for those 2 things tonight before the committee, and thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, so Neil, I'm guessing Neil Egan, maybe, to be followed by Nancy Earl. Neil and Nancy? All right. Casey Kilgore, to be followed by Guadalupe Romero.
Hello, my name is Casey Kilgore. I'm the principal at Franklin School. Excuse my appearance. We had a jogathon, and I'm sunburned and everything to see it all out. So I'm here today for two reasons. The first reason is I was lucky enough to meet with a team who's recommending the other day, and one of the questions I asked was in regards to the state mandates, is it mandatory to follow the mandates that are suggested? And the truth is the answer is no, that it really depends on what is the need of the community, and there's always ways around it, similar to schools. So that was the first. And the other thing I wanted, when I looked at the data and I pulled off an Excel worksheet, and we have a way to look at where every child lives. Majority of the kids that go to our school live between the boundaries of Salinas, Cacique, Milpas, and up towards Ortega. So when we looked at the other side of Milpas, actually on the other side of Milpas is close to the Washington boundary line. So the amount of children that we have crossing Milpas to come to our school currently is minimal. What am I most concerned about are the kids who leave in Franklin and are graduated, go on to Santa Barbara Junior High because they're crossing our area, meaning Milpas, Salinas, Ortega, and Cacique, and they're going across the street at specific spots of Milpas Street. I can tell you on their late start days, all of them start at Winchell's, and the closest place to cross from Winchell's is the Anali. My biggest concern are our current students who then have the light in their eyes to attend college, and I have to hear that we've lost one of them due to what we need to do and take care of their safety as a community. My other concern is, do I have to tell that sibling, like I've had to tell them other siblings when other things have happened, when I have to pull them in my office and say, I have to be the first to tell you that I'm going to take you to your house, but it's not pretty. And are we ready as a community to take on the safety of the kids that are our future and will be our college graduates and will be the professionals that live within and own houses in the future of our own residents and our own community? Thank you.
All right. Guadalupe Romero, and if there are any more speaker slips, to bring them up now.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Soy la mamá de Sergio Romero
I am the mother of Sergio Romero.
y les agradezco a todos ustedes por estar reunidos aquí, a la policía, a
I
los
thank all of
ingenieros.
you for being gathered here, the police, the engineers.
Y he oído todas las partes que lo han dicho,
I heard all parties and what they have said,
pero yo me sigo manteniendo en lo mismo.
but I keep maintaining my position the same.
Yo antes decía que la media, el refugio
I always said that the median
y las intermitentes
and the flashing lights
es bueno,
is good,
pero
but
realmente la gente no hace caso.
people do not pay attention to.
Y aquí hay que prevenir estudiantes,
We have to prevent
bicicletas,
the life of the students, the cyclists,
niños.
the kids.
Y yo prefiero un semáforo.
I prefer a traffic light.
Verdaderamente,
Truly,
yo en lo personal no quiero perjudicar a la ciudad,
personally, I don't want to damage the city.
porque realmente en la calle donde mataron a mi hijo
The street where my son was killed
no es segura.
is not a safe street.
Primero,
First,
pensé en que si pusieran la media de refugio,
if you put a median as a shelter, as a refuge there,
era el carro que estaba, suponiendo que era el carro que estaba parado,
let's assume that the car was stopped.
pero el muchacho que lo mató
The kid that killed my kid,
hizo una desviación.
he made a sway.
Lo mismo se puede hacer por la del refugio.
The same thing with the median,
Volver a desviar para llevar velocidad.
to sway or to swing just to keep going.
No se me hace una solución.
It doesn't seem to me it's a solution.
Toda la gente,
All the people,
incluyéndome yo,
including me myself,
creo que lo mejor es un semáforo.
the best is a traffic light.
Al principio será terrible,
At the beginning it'll be terrible.
pero creo que todos podemos empezar a caminar otra vez
We're all going to start walking again
antes de volver a correr.
before having to run.
Yo les pido, por favor,
I ask you please,
tengo 2 hijos más.
I have 2 more children.
Mi hija Jasmine va a ir a la Santa Bárbara.
My daughter is getting ready to go to Santa Barbara.
Y créanmelo que es terrorífico pensar
Believe me, it
¿Qué?
is terrorizing to think
que puedo perder otro hijo.
that I could lost another child.
Ahorita que veníamos en la marcha,
Now that we were coming, marching down here,
a honor a Sergio Romero, mi hijo,
in honor of my son Sergio Romero,
muchísimos carros no hacían la parada
Lots of the cars did not make the stop.
y muchísimas mentadas teníamos.
And we cursed them a lot.
Porque la gente
We got a lot of cursing.
no, la gente
My apologies.
no para.
My apologies. Yo dije
Y ahora que yo estuve en los zapatos de mi hijo Sergio,
that I was in the shoes of my son Sergio.
fue terrorífico.
It was terrorizing.
Yo les invito
I invite you
a pensar
to think
que la próxima persona podemos ser nosotros mismos.
the next person
Nuestros,
is one of ourselves.
nuestros hijos,
Our kids,
porque creyendo los mayores
because our kids believing on the adults,
que pueden andar por donde ellos quieran,
they feel that they can go anywhere.
los maten.
They're going to get killed.
Por favor,
Please,
el dinero,
the money,
si nos ponemos a trabajar duro,
if we'll work hard at it,
el dinero no es problema.
the money is not a problem.
El velorio de mi hijo, estoy demandada
The funeral of
por
my son,
$20,000 en el hospital por media hora de atención a mi hijo.
I'm being demanded money, $20,000 for
Más aparte,
hours of hospital of my son, plus
lo que costó el funeral de mi hijo. El funeral de mi hijo.
what it cost the funeral of my son.
Créame,
Believe me,
por favor,
please.
la vida
Life
es muy hermosa.
is beautiful.
Los hijos es lo más maravilloso del mundo.
Our kids are the most marvelous thing in the world.
Piensen como padres,
Think as parents,
no como profesionistas.
not as professionals.
Su corazón, señores,
Your heart, ladies and gentlemen,
porque de verdad
truly
es terrible
terrible.
saber que grandes personas se van.
To know that great people
Y no
go
hablo
away.
yo por mi hijo, que como les repito,
For my son, and I repeat again myself,
me cambió la vida.
it changed my life.
Pero tengo dos hijos que amo con todo mi corazón
Two kids left that I love with all my heart.
y quiero que lleguen a grandes.
And I want them to be adults.
Quiero verlos recibirse
I want to see them graduate
con el sueño que yo los tuve de mi primera vez.
with the dream.
Gracias, señora.
Por favor, gracias por todo.
Gracias.
Piénsalo.
All right, so that was the final speaker slip. Are there any more people wishing to give public comment? Okay. So now we can go to questions and comments from the members of the TCC and the NAC. As I said before, and Derek and Pat and Browning are all available, and I'm assuming Sergeant McGrew too, if we have questions. Available to answer questions or to clarify anything, and also you can give your comments. So if you want to give me a little sign that you'd like to be put on the stack to speak, then do so, and we'll go in order. Anyone? Naomi?
Well, you gave us the statistics on accidents.
Is the mic on?
It's green.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a very deceptive green.
You gave us statistics on car accidents, but are there statistics on pedestrian safety with traffic lights vis-a-vis flashing lights? Because it would seem, and the overwhelming sentiment is that for pedestrians, not cars now, but for pedestrians, signal lights would be the safest. Do we have statistics on that?
There are statistics, yes. We compare driver yielding rates, what it's called, driver yielding rates with traffic signals or with hawks that Ms. Byrne mentioned. They're in the high 90% range.
For which way? For
traffic signals or hawks. The flashing beacons are in the 80 to 90% range. So traffic signals do have better driver yielding rates.
If I could just enter, could you explain what a hawk is?
Yeah, it's HAWK is an acronym for High Intensity Activated Crosswalk. There are none in the area that I know. They originated in Tucson, Arizona. They're a type of pedestrian beacon, it's called. It looks like a traffic signal, but the head is shaped differently. Instead of red, yellow, green, it's actually a triangular shaped head, and there's two red lights and a yellow caution light. When it sits dark, when it's not in use, when a pedestrian activates it, a flashing light, yellow light starts to go, warning that it's about to cycle. Cars slow down, stop, and then the two red lights come on. And when it's done, the red lights, they flash, and then it turns off again. The Hawk it's a new device. It was just recently approved for use in California. The thing about a Hawk is, as well as just a pedestrian half signal that it's called, they're only approved for use in mid-block locations. They can't be located within 100 feet of an intersection or a major driveway. So that's why they weren't considered for these locations.
Anybody else? Ana Soto.
On one of the suggestions that you had for both intersections, I think it was the overhanging beacon lights. What is the cost on those, and how quickly what is the time frame of getting those installed per intersection? What is the timeline that we're looking at? If it gets approved and that's the way it goes, this is not that, just to get an idea of what we're looking at.
3 to 5 months or less. Cost-wise, we haven't priced them out yet. I suspect it would probably be in the...
Cheaper than the lights, than the traffic lights?
Definitely, yeah. Probably somewhere in the order of a half to a third the cost of a traffic signal.
Okay, thank you.
Mark?
No, Ms. Imbar said, I think that there are the FHWA approves 3 different types of devices, and do you know what those are?
Curb extensions, I believe. The median refuge island that she mentioned.
Okay.
I believe it's also the pedestrian activated flashing light has given the best results for the in terms of pedestrian activated flashers.
Okay. Also, I was wondering if curb extensions, I might have missed this at the last meeting, I wasn't here, but I wonder if curb extensions were ever considered for Yananali.
We did not consider curb extensions for Yananali simply because there should be some buffer between traffic lanes and curb extensions. And the traffic lanes right now come within 7 feet of the curb. Because that's the alignment to the edge of the parking lane. So effectively, we couldn't really extend the curbs too far out at those locations. Some other effective countermeasures that is recommended, painted crosswalks can be appropriate at certain locations. Here, because it's a wide street with higher speeds, shouldn't be used by itself. It should really be enhanced. Other things that can improve crosswalk conditions is advanced stop bars. That creates a condition where if drivers do in fact yield to pedestrians like they should, it's eliminating what we call a double threat. The vehicles are actually stopping far enough back from the crosswalk that if there's a pedestrian walking in front of the car, they have room to see around that car. Whereas if their bumper is right up on the crosswalk, then it's difficult to see around.
Mr. Vasal?
For staff, is there any way to configure the flashing pedestrian activated flashers to cycle into a red stop after they go amber, amber, amber?
There's not.
Other than the Hawk that was raised up a minute ago?
No, there's no approved traffic control device that operates like that. We have to use proven traffic control devices. Hawks, rapid rectangular flashing beacons, they're all tested before they're approved for use nationwide. Like I said, the Hawks originated in Tucson, Arizona. They went through very extensive tests there. It took well over a decade before they're actually approved for use nationwide. There has to be research done, evidence. University PhDs come in from all over the country and they look at how these devices are operating. And that's all considered before it's approved for use nationwide. Likewise, with the rapid rectangular flashing beacons, there was a really thorough study done of those devices in Florida, Washington, D.C., Chicago, that proved that they work before they were available for use nationwide.
The trouble I'm having with, I think you've done a great job putting together a wide range of alternatives. The problem I'm having with the engineering recommendations is that it's yellow. It's not a stop. It's not a stop light. It's a warning light, and I think on Milpas you need to tell people to stop, not just warn them that something is going on up front. Thank you.
Did you? No. Okay. Mr. Kaufman-Gray?
I'm going to go to warrants again. No one wants to talk about warrants, but because I'm very confused now. The city for many years was trying to get a signal at Figueroa and De La Vina, and they thought that they finally had the funding, they had grant money for it. And then when it came down to actually do it, it was found out that it didn't warrant a signal. And we were unable to put a signal there because we wouldn't have the grant money to fund it. The state grant money would not be allowed to, So now we're over on Milpas Street. You're saying that signals are not the option because of the side crashes that are happening on the other signals. My question is, at these two intersections, is it not warranted because of either traffic volume or accidents, or is it because you're not recommending it because of the other signals are providing more side crashes?
May I approach?
I mean, because I'm confused between what happened on Figueroa and what we're talking about now.
Not a courtroom, so you don't have to be so formal.
Well, in anticipation of a question like this, I put this chart together, and
I didn't send him a memo.
thank you for zooming in. These are all the different warrants. In January, there was one additional warrant added. There's now 10, but that warrant is to do with the railroad, so not applicable here. These are the 9 warrants we consider. And I'm going to step through these just so everybody understands the things we compare as part of our study. And the warrants are just part of the study. They're not the entire study. Yes?
Just so committee members know, if you can't see, you can gather around here because the camera's on the roof. So if Tony, if you want to look at this, come around and look at it, you're welcome to.
Warrants number 1, 2, and 3, they're all vehicular volume-based warrants. And the idea with these 3 warrants is when there's enough side street traffic in combination with a high amount of traffic on the arterial street, it's going to create significant amount of delay for the side streets. Drivers that are delayed get frustrated. Drivers that are frustrated make bad decisions, can lead to crashes. So these are safety and efficiency. Number 1 is what's referred to as an 8-hour warrant. So there has to be a minimum traffic volume for 8 hours of the day. Any 8 hours of the day, they don't have to be in a row, but 8 hours of the day. For example, and I printed off this sheet for Yan and Ollie. Ortega volumes are similar. What would be required for this warrant to be satisfied is 600 vehicles per hour for 8 hours of the day on Milpas. Also, 150 vehicles per hour on one of the side street approach legs. Now, crossing, yeah. So that's 150 per hour for 8 hours. The highest hour actually on Yan and Ollie is 45. So the highest hour on Yan and Ollie doesn't meet the threshold that would be required for 8 hours. As well, there's another variation of the 8-hour warrant that requires a higher volume on Milpas, but lower on Yan and Ollie. Again, that minimum threshold for Yan and Ollie is 75 for 8 hours, but for 1 hour, the highest 1 hour, we've only got 45. For a 4-hour traffic vehicular volume, it goes up. Milpas would require 1,300 vehicles per hour, Yananali 80. That would be for 4 hours of the day. Peak hour, any one single hour in the day, would require 1,350 or 170 on Yananali. And again, Yananali, the highest 1 hour is 45. Now, what this is really trying to be a reflection of is good practice for how much delay, based on experience and research that's been done throughout the country over many, many years, as to what thresholds do these balances that we're talking about in terms of more crashes happening at a traffic signal versus less. When do the safety benefits at a traffic signal start to outweigh the negatives that we've been talking about? Based on research and experience that's been done, these numbers are a good reflection of that. But by themselves, they're not a end-all be-all by any means. You know, we certainly have to use our engineering judgment and interpret these numbers. But these are a very good reflection of when it's appropriate. These are the volume-based. There's also pedestrian volumes. And admittedly, to me, this is really high, but this is the engineering standard. For any 1 hour, there'd be 190 pedestrians required to cross, or 100 for 4 hours of the day. The highest we observed at Yananali is 42 for 1 hour, so it's substantially lower than the required threshold. That's pedestrian volumes. There's also provision for school crossing. You have to have 20 students per hour, but before you're allowed to use this warrant, you should explore other countermeasures, such as median refuge islands, flashers. There's such a strong opinion in the transportation research industry that traffic signals can have a negative impact on safety. And where I was coming from, explaining what's happening at the other traffic signals, is why we're concerned about that. You know, I want to make sure everybody understands that at traffic signals, crashes still happen. That's really the point. Other warrants, coordinated traffic signal system, that's not applicable here. That has to do with when you have more of a highway type arterial signals that are spaced far apart. Having a traffic signal can bunch the traffic into platoons, and it's not necessary here. It's not applicable. Crash experience, and that's where the requirement is for 5 correctable type traffic signal crashes, or 5 correctable type crashes in a 12-month period. A correctable type crash means something that if that traffic signal was there, it would have corrected that problem. You know, somebody smashing into a light pole, you know, that's not something the traffic signal is going to fix. But a T-bone type crash or some pedestrian type collisions, traffic signal could correct those. But at the same time, the reason that number is rather high is because experience has shown that traffic signals don't make all crashes go away. So if there's any less than 5, chances are you could actually end up creating more of a problem than you have when you start with. And that's really where we are with Ortega and Yananali, is the crash rates are so low right there that by putting a traffic signal in, we expect it to go higher. And that's really where we're coming from here is we recognize that it would be definitely easier for pedestrians to get across the street with a traffic signal. No question. We've all used traffic signals, and we all base our opinion of traffic signals on our experiences. But what I do is I comb through data, looking back 5 years, 10 years. I'm looking through the crash records of crashes that are happening out there that we're not witnessing personally, and I start to add everything up, and more crashes are happening at the traffic signals than are happening at Yananali and Ortega. And that's really why we're recommending alternative measures, because the number of crashes based on what's happening at other intersections could go up. And any type of crash, there's risk. You know, people can get hurt, people can get killed, property damage. And we really want to try to avoid that. The problem here is pedestrians getting across the street, and we're trying not to introduce a new problem into that. Other warrants, the roadway network, when there's an intersection of two major streets, it gives us a provision that we could install a traffic signal. This one I've never actually used, because any intersection of two major streets tends to meet one of these warrants up here. In the last volume, or warrant is for bicycle volumes, and 50 side street bicycles are required, and the most we counted at Yan and Ollie are 8. Traffic signal warrants, even if one of these were met, it doesn't mean a traffic signal should be installed. I've studied intersections before that have met several of these, but it wouldn't actually improve operations. You know, there's been side streets that I've studied that are really high in volumes, but when you look at what's happening on the main street, there's really large gaps in traffic. There's no crashes that are happening. If we were to put in a traffic signal, we'd actually causing more delay for that side street traffic, because they have to wait for their green light to come around, rather than making use of that big gap in traffic and just going during a stop sign. So just because some of these would be met, it wouldn't necessarily mean we would install a signal as well, but that's not the case here. What we found out there in terms of numbers, just traffic volumes, pedestrians, bikes, crashes, is all falling well below this. But putting all of this aside, what it really means is traffic operations would not be improved. We'd be looking at potentially higher crashes, higher risk of injury, death, property damage, and as well more delay for traffic using Milpas, using the side street. Even though if traffic signals were there, they would be synchronized. Due to the spacing of the intersections out there, intersections on Milpas are spaced fairly tightly. It wouldn't be possible to time those lights perfectly. There'd always be one direction of traffic that would have to stop. So that's another concern of ours as well.
Other comments, questions? Yes, Sally?
Derek, don't go far.
Approach.
So, question to start with is, and I know I've already asked you this, given that we know that people do not cross at Yananali and Ortega Street, or do not cross Milpas very often, as you know, the public has already said, would that not account for the low numbers?
It likely does. Undoubtedly, people feel uncomfortable crossing there and go down to intersections where they feel more comfortable crossing, Mason or Montecito. What it really comes back to, though, is even if the numbers were higher and we put in a traffic signal, we'd still come back to the same problem with increased crashes.
And that's a prediction, correct?
That's a prediction.
Oh, wait, no, Pat uses predictions. You use experience. So I'm just like, want to make sure I get the terminology correct. But that's not experience or predictions on Milpas Street. That's just generic, correct?
That's generic. The table that I just went through, it's using actual numbers from Milpas, but it's based on experience nationwide.
Okay.
So that's a really important thing to point out. So once we started our study and kind of went through these 9 different warrants, at that point we start to drill down even further and go, okay, well, it's not warranted per the federal standards, but what's that really mean on Milpas? And that's why we started to compare what's happening at each other signalized intersection on Milpas, because traffic behaves the same 500 feet away. We're not talking about something in New York City. We're talking about something a few hundred feet away. The intersections are all about the same width. Milpas is configured the same. So that's why the comparing the crash rates at these other signalized intersections is so applicable to what's happening at Yananali and Ortega.
Isn't it possible, though, that if there were traffic lights at Ortega and at Yananali, that the collisions, T-bones, whatever they are, at the other lighted streets would be lessened because there would be 2 other streets with lights? So it may not necessarily increase collisions along Milpas Street, period. It might decrease.
It's a hard prediction to make. One problem that we have in the traffic engineering world is tightly spaced intersections, and the way drivers behave between tightly spaced intersections. Drivers oftentimes are looking down the road too far and paying too much attention to that traffic signal 500 feet away. So there's also the possibility that with extra traffic signals along there, their eyes are going to be drawn further down the street, and it could actually increase crashes at existing signals. It's a possibility. It's impossible to predict.
And it's also possible that it would decrease because cars are stopped at Yananali and Ortega because of lights, correct?
It's correct.
Thank you very much.
I skipped over Sebastian.
Here. You mentioned there's more rear end and side swipes with the traffic lights. Traffic accidents are higher with the signal lights, and the traffic signals have a negative impact for safety. How much less would it be with a beacon?
How much less would it be with the beacon?
I mean, how much safer would it be with a beacon? So, as an example, with the rear ends, how many less rear ends would it be with a beacon rather than a signal light?
The rear ends would be less. All crashes with a beacon would be less because the beacon would only be cycling with the presence of a pedestrian versus a traffic signal at Ortega or Yananali. That would cycle around to the side street for vehicles and pedestrians. So it would be cycling much more often. Where you would see a reduction in crashes for a beacon versus a traffic signal is it would be cycling less often because it's just pedestrians activating it versus pedestrians and vehicles.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Molina? Yeah, go ahead.
I have a couple of questions. I'm a little confused. I'm sorry. When you said you would minimize the 2-lane to 1-lane and it would widen the bicycle lanes, what happens after that street in between Coda and Yananali? Because that's not going to be changed. Where do the bicyclists go? I mean, if the bicycle lane is in that one section, and then what happens? Where do they go? I'm sorry, I just don't understand the flow of traffic.
Right. That is an issue.
Okay. I'm glad.
Bicycles south of Coda would be required to ride in traffic.
Okay.
I talked to Ed France about this the other night, and he very avid cyclist, obviously. He was saying that the good thing about having bike lanes between Coda and Canon Perdido is that Coda is it's not a recognized bike route in the city, but it's well used by cyclists because it's fairly flat and it doesn't have a lot of stops on it between Milpas and the downtown area. Even though there are bike lanes on Carrillo, there are bike lanes on De La Guerra for Canon Perdido, thank you, for a distance. He felt that Coda would be more usable. So having that link down Milpas to turn west onto Coda, he indicated to me that he thought that would be valuable.
But in some of the meetings I've attended, as you know, I've attended a lot of them, I thought cyclists were saying that their jeopardy was coming down Milpas from the Hollywood Bowl all the way to the beach. So your recommendation doesn't create safety. In my opinion, it creates kind of a false sense of safety because it's only a couple of blocks and then they're back into the same problems that they are today, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, that's one issue. So given the solutions that you've recommended, I guess, and I said this before, I was hoping that your recommendations would have a long-term face to the recommendations, that this is something that would last for the next 10, 15 years as traffic is going to increase, we know, because of the freeway. And I have not heard about the traffic that increases when there's a concert at the Bowl. And doing shows myself there and living in that area, you think it's dangerous to walk during the day. When you have all these out-of-town people who have no respect for the Milpas residents and they're just speeding up, or they're trying to get out of the bowl at night and people are trying to cross the street because they parked 5 or 7 blocks away, I'm just concerned that your recommendations isn't adding the increase of traffic at certain times, and it's not talking about the increase of traffic when the in the next 10 years, let's say. So I find that the recommendations, and just my frustration, is it's very narrow. It doesn't really give a sense of safety for drivers or pedestrians, because it's only addressing a little narrow couple streets, and it's only addressing what's occurred. It's not addressing the whole life of that street from, not Cañón Perdido. I want to hear about all the way from, is it Anapamu? Mm-hmm. Anapamu all the way to Carrillo, because, I mean, there are some nasty traffic problems. And if we're talking about these 2 streets, why aren't we talking about Milpas as a totality? And I think somebody said that earlier, that we had a master plan that addressed the whole section. Given what I said, then your recommendation should somewhat fit into that in terms of its growth, and I don't see how that happens. Am I not seeing it?
Well, you're talking very big picture.
Well,
here.
of course.
Yes.
Milpas is a big street.
You're right. And it's very challenging. If we start to look at future growth, if we start to look at accommodating traffic from the bowl, that all suggests not reducing lanes at all. And we're all the different uses on Milpas are competing for space. We have traffic, we have bikes, buses, parking, pedestrians, trees. They're all requiring space. So if we're going to have a conversation about long-term planning, that really has to involve whether or not we're allocating space properly right now. And that would be a long process going through a study like that. We're focused on something we can do in fairly short order. And I understand where you're coming from, but the short term, something we can do versus long-term planning.
To clarify your point, short term, how short? What are we talking about? This proposal that you're recommending is good for the next 3 years? I'm just trying to get a sense, because some of the issues that I'm raising are not future growth. They're there today. Mm-hmm. Like the freeway's going to open, the bowl's there. That's not future. That is today. So give me kind of an idea of, in how you did this analysis, are we talking about maybe taking care of this particular problem for 3 years, 5 years, 10?
Well, at Ortega?
It's 10. Yeah, and Yananoli.
Well, I'll start with Ortega. That's a long-term solution, restriping the road.
Okay.
One of the things that also can happen with restriping the road is suddenly there's space available to widen the sidewalk. That's a physical improvement that would be in place for many, many years.
Okay.
That's a reallocation of space. Suddenly we're taking space away from cars where the capacity is not needed, and we're reallocating it to the other traffic lane, bikes, parking, potentially even the sidewalk.
Okay.
That's a long-term solution. Yananoli, that solution, I think, could work for many years. And what would really drive that conversation to the next level would be a desire for space reallocation. And realistically, the traffic volumes aren't going down. We need 2 lanes of traffic in each direction there. That's going to be very difficult to take that space away. So what else is there to give and take there? There's parking, there's sidewalks, there's the trees. That's a really big conversation that I can't solve that one in 2 months. That's a big planning study.
I have one last question. Santa Barbara Junior High has on CODA a flashing yellow light, right, for kids to cross the street. How did that come to being, and there was nothing of that consideration on Milpas? Well, you weren't here then.
I
I'm
wasn't
sorry.
here.
Oh,
Browning, do you have any historical perspective? The old guy.
sorry.
That was part of a Safe Route to School program. We had applied for a Safe Route to School grant. You know, we did the curb extensions on by the junior high school and the high school, and we were also part of that was putting the flashing beacon on Coda Street, just to give a little bit of advance warning of the crosswalk there. I think it's at Nopal Street. You know, the cars on that street especially in the morning when students are arriving, they're really driving at or below the speed limit. But it's, again, adding something addition that was working with Drew Van Hinkle was here and we're working with the school.
But why wasn't Milpas included in that?
Because the desire was on Coda Street. That's where most of the students were walking there. And frankly, when we were doing the analysis, if my recollection is correctly, most of the students, when they were crossing Milpas, were crossing at Coda Street at the signalized intersection, not at Ortega Street. And that's where we really encouraged them to cross at Ortega Street.
That's what I wanted to do. Thank you.
Mr. Tabor?
One quick question. We observed some tricky maneuvering on our site visit on Monday when buses were stopping, cars backing up behind them, and cars trying to get out of their way or get around them. The question being, if the neighborhood transition striping were implemented, would that allocate space for buses to be able to pull over and not block traffic on Milpas Street?
Yes, the space reallocation, if you will, would include a wider parking aisle where a bus essentially sits in. So, yeah, there'd be room for the buses, and as well a bike lane would pass the outside of the bus. Yeah.
And I just want to point out, too, that Sherry Fisher from MTD is here, so she's, as always, happy to answer any questions about bus stuff. Yeah. Mr. Trujillo?
Thank you. So if we went with staff recommendations and we did the flashers and brought pedestrians back to those intersections, would you guys then come back like in 6 months and reanalyze the data and possibly warrant stoplights?
Yes, we definitely reanalyze everything, and as well, not only counting the numbers of pedestrians using the enhanced crossings, we'd also analyze how well drivers are yielding to pedestrians. You know, has this in fact been a successful implementation? Can pedestrians get across the street now? And if it's working, you know, we'd probably leave it alone.
So, but stoplights would be possibility down the road?
There'd have to be some sort of need. You know, if for some reason, if we were to do pedestrian activated flashers of some kind, and it was creating an operational issue, wasn't working, wasn't getting the job done, if it increased crashes, which I'm quite certain it won't, yeah, a higher level of traffic control, such as a traffic signal, would be a possibility.
And also, because those are both Yanoli and Ortega entrances to the school, is it possible to get the school zone flashers on both those streets?
The school zone flashers would function essentially the same
or to lower the speed limit during school hours. The school zone.
Yeah, we'd have to review that. Yeah, I can't really say right now whether or not that would be appropriate.
Yeah, Ms. Foxon.
Question, you said that at a school crossing there needs to be 20 people crossing per hour? Is that right?
Yeah, 20 students crossing per hour. As well, we have to analyze the gaps in traffic. There's a lot of streets in the city that have 20 students per hour crossing. But you also have to look at the number of gaps in traffic, the opportunities that those 20 students have to get across the street. If you find that the combination of the gaps in traffic and the number of students is high enough and difficult enough for those students to get across the street, then what we need to do is try to find something besides a traffic signal to make that crossing easier for the students. If whatever we try isn't successful, the next step then is a traffic signal.
Okay. I know where Franklin School is, so Milpas then counts as an intersection going to a school, in this case, where you're counting 20 students per hour?
Well, any intersection that has students going through it on their way to school is potentially a school-used intersection, yes.
Okay, so it doesn't have to be within, like, 2 or 3, 4 blocks of a school?
No, it just has to be a way that kids get to school.
Okay, so theoretically, then, if somebody who lived at, I don't know, let's say Mason Street and went to the high school, and they're going up Milpas Street, they get to be counted at all of the intersections?
They would be counted crossing Milpas. And high school students are also kind of a special case. They're adults.
Not all of them.
Not all of them.
Yeah.
We
not until they're 18.
But they do start to possess some judgment.
I don't know.
Trying to say this properly. More like adults. Obviously, when you compare a high school student to a 5-year-old, there's going to be different judgment levels. But yes, if a high school student were to travel from Milpas and Mason area up to the high school area, we'd only be looking at where that student is actually making their crossings, not whether or not they're walking parallel to the street.
Okay, so they literally have to cross. So if a student started, say, at Mason and went down, turned around, and came back up, made all these little crossings, that would count, correct?
It would.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Green?
Oh, yes. Well, I also looked up warrants. I was looking at warrants, and I found this phrase, which I thought was interesting. It said, engineering study data may include the following. Of course, they talk about pedestrian volume and they talk about car, but they also say information about nearby facilities and activity centers that serve the young, elderly, and or persons with disabilities. And I thought that was interesting because it seemed to me might almost be speaking about Ortega, facilities, the bowl, activity centers, schools, and even the business about disabilities, because the bus stop there, the number 2 bus stops there, and the 2, as anybody who's ridden the 2, there's a significant percentage of people with disabilities, both physical and mental. And I was just wondering if that, as it says here, engineering study data may include, have you included that when you did this? Did you think about the neighborhood, about the facilities, the schools, the bus stops, the disabilities?
Yeah, and what that's that kind of data is really leading to is how people use the intersection.
Use the street, yes.
And the street, pardon me.
Yes.
Absolutely. And so when we're looking at an intersection and whether or not a traffic signal is the most appropriate form of traffic control, we also need to look at whether or not there are good alternatives for people to be getting across the street. So in the case of Milpas and Ortega, looking at the school and how students are traveling to the street or traveling back and forth across the street, we know that the vast majority of students are crossing at Coda. We did counts at both intersections.
Well, but that's because it's safer, right?
Right, and that's a good thing.
Yes,
they're using good judgment.
But isn't that kind of twisted? I mean, they're not crossing at Ortega because it's dangerous. But if it were safe, wouldn't they cross at Ortega?
Well, we don't always install traffic signals just to make it more convenient because of the safety issues. If we can address the mobility concerns, getting people back and forth across the street, like they're doing at Coda without introducing safety concerns at Ortega, that's a good thing.
Yeah, Ms. Walters.
Hi, Derek. Well, I think we're all getting a really good education about what warrants a traffic signal and, looking at the statistics and everything, which is making it maybe a little less confusing. But what I'm still kind of having a hard time wrapping my mind around are the two signal lights that are located mid-block, one on Cabrillo where the palm tree-lined park is, and the other is really, really close to the signal light at Cabrillo and Castillo, and it is where the City College people cross over to the marina. Mm-hmm. And so those two non-intersections seem like they would have been really good candidates for signal, or for flashers. So I'm just really confused as to why there's signal lights there and it's not even dangerous intersections.
Right. Well, I wasn't here at the time when they were installed. But looking at those intersections and the type of flashers that were available at the time, the flashers that we showed in the video weren't available. The type of flashers that were available a few years ago were the less effective kinds, the beacons, like out front of the junior high school. They're actually fairly effective on the narrower street with lower volumes, but you get to a wider street like Cabrillo, probably wouldn't be very effective. The reason those traffic signals were installed is the engineer at the time looked at the movements of the area, looking at facilities, how people are moving through the area. And the pedestrian signal at Ambassador Park, the one that's halfway between State Street and Castillo, that one was chosen to go there. It actually was part of a bigger project at first. There were, it was an RDA project, and originally there were proposed to be 3 traffic signals between State and Castillo, one at Chapala, one at Ambassador Park, one at Bath. And that was to address the pedestrian demand going back and forth from the beach side to the inland side during peak seasons. The study was done, and there actually weren't enough pedestrians to warrant all 3 signals. So it was decided that putting one pedestrian signal in the middle and trying to concentrate those pedestrian movements towards the center would meet the pedestrian demands. As well, the crosswalks at Chapala and at Bath were both enhanced. So that overall plan was decided to be the best way to get pedestrians back and forth across the street between Castillo and State. Now the signal at the end of the Pershing Park bike path, which is the signal just immediately west of Castillo, that signal went in as part of the bike path project. That bike path was actually supposed to go all the way through the park and meet up with Montecito. My understanding is that path, correct me if I'm wrong, Browning, but that path is actually why the signal at Rancherio and Montecito was installed, to provide a link through the neighborhood to the beachway. A study was done as to how much usage that path would get, and it was anticipated to be quite well used. That path isn't complete. That link isn't there, so it's likely affected the amount of usage that it's receiving.
Sebastian.
Okay, talking about those two signal lights, the light at Ambassador Park and also the one 200 feet west of Castillo, those two would still need a warrant even though it's an RDA project? I mean, the Ambassador Park still needs a warrant, correct?
Yeah, a study, an engineering study that includes
there is a study, analysis, and warrant.
I don't know where it is. It's in old project files, and I haven't dug them up.
Okay, but and then as far as the other one, there should be a warrant also, correct?
Yeah, same. They're in old project files. Yes.
Okay. Well, being that we're talking about it, because, I mean, there was a request on February 8th for the study analysis and warrant of those two signal lights. That was February 8th. What's that, 7 weeks? So is in the makings, I take it?
We'll look for it. I don't have it.
Okay. Other questions again? And you can make comments as well in addition to questions. I had a couple questions. Many of you asked them already, so that's why I waited. But the one member of the public mentioned lowering the speed limit. And could you just explain what happens when the conditions of a road change? So if there were neighborhood transition striping done and the decrease in lanes, what does that mean for the speed limit? And can you explain the really weird thing that happens in California when you want to look at speed limits?
Right. Well, in California, state statutes, that's how we have to set speed limits. Drivers actually set speed limits. The speeds that we all drive on the streets, those speeds that we're traveling actually set the speed limits. Now what that means is when we are setting a speed limit for a street, we go out and do what's called a speed study. We find out what the prevailing speed is being traveled on a street. And the speed limit is generally set within about 5 miles an hour of what's called the 85th percentile speed, and that's the speed at which 85% of traffic is traveling at or below. The basic premise is that most of us are reasonable drivers. You know, there's 15% that they travel too fast or unreasonable, but most of us are reasonable drivers. So if we set an artificially low speed limit, that creates speeders out of people that are otherwise reasonable. So that's really the reason behind why the state has done what it's done, is to not create speed traps and really let the natural flow of traffic dictate the speed limit. What we've found on Milpas Street is the 85th percentile speed is about 32, 33 miles an hour. You know, we rounded that down to 30, and that's how the speed limit was set. If a speed limit was set at 25 miles an hour, I wouldn't expect a significant difference in the speeds people are actually traveling. People tend to travel at a speed that they're comfortable with on a roadway. You know, there's always some people that are going to push it and travel as fast as they can, but people generally travel what they feel comfortable. You know, they'll take the speed limit into consideration, but most people just drive. And if you're a reasonable driver and you're driving comfortably, you'll usually be within the speed limit. Now, what happens if we reconfigure a roadway? How comfortable drivers feel traveling at higher speeds can change. Right now, drivers don't feel comfortable traveling very fast on Milpas. Most drivers. There's a lot going on Milpas. We call it side friction. When there's a lot going on, you don't feel comfortable going fast. When you're in a wide open space with a wide roadway, no traffic around you, you feel comfortable going fast. But when you get into a constrained environment like Milpas, where there's a lot going on visually, you know, narrow lanes, a lot of other traffic, it gets less comfortable to go fast. So what would happen if we were to do a neighborhood transition striping with wider lanes? The wider lanes might make drivers feel more comfortable going faster. It might. But what might counteract that is the fact that traffic would be traveling single file, and those other cars that you're interacting with wouldn't let you go any faster. So it's difficult to predict whether or not speeds would go up or down, but potentially it could go up. I'd expect it would probably stay the same.
Okay. And then, one thing, which I know people hate these, and I guess I kind of do too, but it was something that wasn't mentioned at all, which probably means that it's not feasible. But there are places in the city that have those large speed humps, bumps, whatever they call them here, leading up to either, you know, a crosswalk or, you know, something like that, or, you know, making people slow down, obviously. Why, I mean, is that something that would that generally would slow someone down before a pedestrian crossing?
It would. We have to be careful where we place speed humps in relation to crosswalks. If you have too many traffic control devices in a row, drivers focus on the first one and they lose sight of what's immediately on the other side. So a speed hump, we would want to give a certain amount of space between whatever's going on beyond it. As far as how that would apply to Milpas, it's a traffic calming device. And what that means is it's designed to slow traffic down, and that means all traffic, even emergency response vehicles. So our emergency responders, they need to respond to emergencies quickly, and if we put anything out onto the street unreasonably, like speed humps, it slows them down and it affects their ability to get there fast. So Milpas isn't a candidate for speed humps.
Okay. I just want to ask about everything we could possibly do to Milpas. And in the one other thing, which I think at our last TCC meeting we discussed, and but I just want to make sure that we repeat it again. If we did the pedestrian activated flashers and the pedestrian island, which I know I've seen some that have that little paddle sign that say, you know, it's the law, pedestrians have right of way. Obviously, if we did that, we would need to have them be in English and Spanish. I just want to confirm that that's possible, and that's what we would put in if that's what was ordered.
The signs facing traffic have to be per regulation, and there are no Spanish signs in the MUTCD. The warning signs that we would give to pedestrians using those facilities, we would definitely put bilingually.
So at the button.
Yep. And the premise is that it is a yellow light. It is a warning device. Drivers, it's not a red light. Not all of them will stop. Most will, but not all. And as a pedestrian, use caution. So as a pedestrians are used to hitting a button and getting the right-of-way with a traffic signal going across the road. We want to make sure that if a pedestrian hits a button, they're crossing with caution. So there'll be a little sign there that says, use caution when crossing, something to that effect. Cross traffic may not stop. Just something so that pedestrians don't just hit the button and march across the street. Hit the button, look up street. If traffic's stopping for you, then go. That's what we want.
But that button, just to clarify, the button, that would be in English and Spanish?
Yeah, we could do those in both.
Great. Then a question maybe for some old-timers, people who've been in the department longer. They're still young and vibrant human beings, but they've been. I mean, where's Rob? We know how many years he's been with the city. The discussion of the Milpas revitalization long-term, like visioning or something that occurred was before my time in the mix. But I'd be interested to hear what that came from and what happened to it, and yeah.
I'm not even sure if Rob was here when that was occurred, but he knows something about it. Rob, are you? He'll come up and discuss it.
Sorry, Rob.
I thought he was going to get away without having to say something tonight.
I thought that was ironic that you said the young people who've been here a long time. Yeah, that was interesting. That's back in the time of George Girth. By the way, I'm Rob Dayton, Principal Transportation Planner. George Girth was a traffic engineer three traffic engineers ago, and we were working on the Milpas area with then the Milpas Business Association, and to do actually a beautification project, and we had some money, we had a grant to do, and so one of the things we suggested was actually what is being proposed tonight with the neighborhood striping, the neighborhood transitional striping, a 3-lane section, and then we were actually proposing it to increase some parking. We're talking about some diagonal parking. One of the things they wanted was more parking, and they actually did not want the plan. They ended up not wanting it because mainly because of the traffic congestion concerns with going with 3 lanes, and that's what they were concerned about. And finally, just so you know kind of where that process ended up, it kind of lingered for a long time. And the money was eventually used for the pedestrian signals that you see up and down the corridor, the pedestrian lighting. The pedestrian lighting that's oriented toward the sidewalk. Does that help?
That's helpful, yeah. I think those are my questions. Are there more? Yes, Ms. Horn.
Just a really quick thing is, it was mentioned a couple times about a pedestrian crossing and a car stopping and then another car going around and hitting the pedestrian. And I just had the impression, and I just wondered if this is right, that if there's restriping the way it's been configured, if that is impossible to happen.
It would require a driver to actually drive out of the traffic lane and through the bike lane. So it would certainly discourage the vast majority of drivers. Someone might pass where they're not supposed to, but legally there would be no passing.
Yes, Ms. Molina?
Drive where it went from 2 lanes to 1 lane. And certainly it has addressed a number of issues, except coming out of your driveway. It's really scary. And I live right on Cliff Drive. However, I see cars going around into the bike lane to pass the slower car. That's one. And I do see it. And I also see, which is the reason I thought we were doing this, was to lower the speeds. And some cars are really good about lowering, and others are still going there 80 miles an hour. So that's just a comment, because that was a basis. And I did mention at this meeting, one of the meetings, that it was a great solution.
I think you turned the mic off.
I'm sorry, it's not, it's like you said it earlier, it doesn't cover all the issues or the driving patterns that still can occur. Those are still going to occur because it's driver-driven, the person-driven. Does that make sense? They're still going to break the law.
Okay, Anna?
I just have one last comment and then a question for our officer. In our previous meetings, I've always said that we need to educate not only the drivers on all these new roundabouts on Milpa Street, the bulb outs, but we need to educate the pedestrians on how it's safe for them to, when it's safe for them to cross. Like you just mentioned, I believe in our other meeting, there was another person that got off the sidewalk and didn't allow the vehicle enough time to stop and got injured. Is that correct? Or
That's my understanding from the police report,
okay.
yes.
So I know that the law states that pedestrians have the right of way, but pedestrians need to also know that they need to make sure that the car sees them, and also, just educate everybody all around, whether it's with the media, television, newspaper, on how to maneuver around town with all these new lights and sidewalks and bulb outs and stuff, just to make it safe for the pedestrians, the cyclists, and the vehicles. And my last question is for our officer, if he can tell us what the outcome was of today's stings, because I know they were out there, and that's a crucial part in this whole thing as to whether people, even though we're having meetings and even though it's been advertised and it was known that today was the day, did people stop? Or the
No,
pedestrians?
they
No.
didn't.
Okay.
They did in some areas, though.
Okay.
I'm
Can you give
Sergeant
us a
Mike
little
McGrew. I'm
breakdown?
in charge of the traffic detail at the police department. And today we hit 4 locations. The first one was up at Anacapa and Arriaga Street. And at that location, we cited 9 people for failing to yield. And what we did was we had a decoy, actually from the traffic engineer's office. John Russo comes out. We work closely with the traffic engineer's office on a lot of things, but he came out and risked his life and went into the crosswalk for us, and we had several officers watching it. And what we do on these stings is that we put a road cone up about 200 feet from the crosswalk. So we measure it out, we calculate the perception reaction time, and so that gives the driver a fair chance when he steps out in there. So we had 9 violations that we cited. We then moved to Milpas and Yananali Street, and within a couple hours, we cited 39 people for that violation. We then went over to Salina Street, and where were we? Salinas and, trying to think of the cross street off my head.
Clifton?
Yeah, Clifton, thank you. Right, Salinas and Clifton. And we only had one violation there that we cited. So we were there for a while, and nothing was happening, just one person. And then we went up to De La Vina Street in Arden, and up there we cited 11 people. So probably could have cited more people. We had one motorcycle officer went down last week, so we didn't have him available. And then we had another motorcycle that went down as well, so we were 2 people short. But we did this about a month ago, and in total we got 60 citations today. And that's what we did last time as well. But the media was great. They came out today, and that's part of the education component. That's why we do that. Why we do these type of stings is because we want people to know, hey, we're out there. Watch out. And we also try to stress to the pedestrians too that they have a responsibility as well. So you can't just step out and expect cars to stop and come to a screeching halt. Everybody's got to use their head when they're out in the roadway. The traffic's dangerous, and everybody has to be careful.
Same thing with the cyclist accident yesterday too. I believe he crossed in front of the
he was
he
was the one at fault.
around.
There was a person that was driving on Calle Cesar Chavez southbound near Yananala Street, and the bicyclist was going northbound, and he made a left turn in front of the vehicle, and he was struck by the vehicle, and he's in pretty bad shape. So pretty unfortunate. But we do. The police department does work with safe routes and with the schools as well to talk to the kids about crossing the streets and where to do it. And there are intersections that are safer than others too to cross. And so, I do that myself. Even today, when I'm driving a motorcycle, it's kind of a dangerous thing to do as well. But there's places that I'll use instead of other places, and that's just because it's safer.
So why do you think the number of tickets at Yananali and Milpas was so much higher than the other intersections?
Well, I think because of the amount of traffic that was there. We have it's a higher volume of traffic than any other location that we had. And people weren't stopping, so.
Yeah, Ms. Foxen.
Hi.
Hi.
So, in your professional opinion, if there were a traffic light at Milpas and Yananali, and somebody were crossing, a pedestrian was crossing at the green light across Milpas Street, where the car has a red light, you wouldn't have given out 39 tickets today, correct?
That might be so, but I think when looking at these things, you got to look at the totality of everything, and it maybe as a pedestrian, it would be safer if they have a red light to cross. But then, I do go to a lot of red light violations and people who blow through red lights, and there's pretty serious accidents there too. So I've seen it in everywhere. I mean, pedestrians, vehicles, bicycles. It's dangerous, no matter what you're doing. And
the chances are you wouldn't have had 39 violations.
If there was a red light, no, we wouldn't. We probably wouldn't have those violations. No.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah, and we have some of our liaisons. We have our city council liaison, Kathy Murillo, and I saw our planning commission liaison, Deborah Schwartz. I think she had to leave.
Madam Chair.
And the mayor's in the corner.
Madam Chair, are you going to allow all the committee members speak to what they would like, option-wise?
Yeah, I mean, that's been, you could have done it up to now. Yeah. These are not just questions, comments,
Okay, 'cause
motions would be in order.
Questions, and then you're going to go down and let everyone speak on what their
This is now's the time, people. Let's talk. Yeah,
I
no.
think it'd be fair first to let the liaisons speak, and then just go down all the way down and let everyone speak.
Yeah, I was just going,
Thank you.
in the interest of time, not everyone is forced to speak, so you do not have to say something, so that's why I was going on.
Okay, well, I thought
as
this
people
was just a
raising their
question
hands.
period, and
No.
now it would be time for us to allow us to say what we would like.
I'm sorry if that wasn't clear.
Thank you.
But Councilmember Murillo, if you want to speak at the... Okay.
I had a question for Sergeant McGrew. Thank you
Sergeant. So
It's okay.
doing a sting is different from regular traffic enforcement, because I'd like to consider increased traffic enforcement on Milpas Street. So what does that look like for our audience? You cruise up and down, you park and wait for people to, what does that look like?
Well, what we have right now, over the past year, staffing at the police department was low, and basically we have to staff patrol cars to answer 911 emergency calls. And so when staffing gets low, the first thing that they'll do usually is they'll take specialty positions, which that's what the motorcycle detail is. We're a specialty unit. And they'll put them into a black and white. So you don't have those officers that are out doing the specific traffic enforcement. So I'd say over the last year, we were down. We maybe had one or two at best during the day. Probably since the start of this year, even before that a little bit, we've regained all of our officers. So we have, well, most of them, but we have 5 motorcycle officers and myself, the supervisor. And what we've done is geographically split up the entire city. So I have an officer in each beat. We have 6 beats in the city. The east side is 1 beat, and and the officer that's in charge of that area, I get all the complaints and things that come in, and I review all the traffic collisions and look at all the stuff that's going on. And we'll have that officer just basically kind of like a beat coordinator, but they're the traffic officer. So if we do have, like lately, there's a lot of attention over on the east side. So that's why we had two places that we went to, and Clifton and Salinas was actually getting a lot of we got a lot of phone calls about Salinas Street lately. So that's why we went over there. But we do have the patrol officers that are out there, and they're not only just handling 911 calls, but they do traffic enforcement as well. So we have beefed it up, I guess, if you want to say that. There has been more officers out there, and it's kind of a busier place traffic-wise than some of the other beats, so some of the officers help them out.
But your presence out there slows people down on Milpas Street.
Yes,
Okay.
People slow down.
Then I want to take that into consideration. And Chair Blackerby and Chair Pena, if I could ask one more question, and this one would be of I think, Mr. Bailey. And this one is your transitional striping goes to CODA, and you're saying don't make it go any farther south. It looks like there's so many benefits. What's the negative of making it go farther south? So we're talking CODA to Haley, Gutierrez, Montecito, and Yananali. Is that the... yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's the right order.
Okay.
It's certainly a possibility. I mean, the trade-off for doing that, and it's a reallocation of space that we were talking about, is increased congestion, just because the demand is higher the further south you go. So increased congestion.
So people would wait longer at the light?
Yeah, and could actually trade you places. There's a
He's kinda-
slide I can show.
It's over there.
Thank you. This is what we call in the traffic engineering world a capacity analysis. ICU stands for intersection capacity utilization. It's a measurement of how much of the available capacity at an intersection is being used based on the traffic volumes. So this top row here represents Milpas, starting at De La Guerra, Ortega, CODA. So this is the area here that we'd be talking about restriping. Then once we get south of CODA, Haley, Gutierrez, and further on south to Montecito and Yananali, these decimal points, like I said, represent how much of the capacity is being utilized. The letter next to it is a grade. A is good, F is bad, just like our grades in school. So what this represents is existing conditions at De La Guerra. Only half of the available capacity at the intersection is being utilized during the PM peak. So that means there's plenty of capacity to spare. So what that turns into when we go to the restriping, 0.66. So that kind of gives you an idea that there'd be a third more capacity being used at De La Guerra. As you can see, as you move down the corridor, Coda goes from a 0.53, a B, to a 0.68, a C, and then Haley starts getting more congested, a 0.6 to a 0.83, and Gutierrez a 0.63 up to a 0.92 F. And what this really means in real world is how congested it's going to be and how long you're going to have to wait to get through a traffic signal. You know, if we're talking about 0.92 an F down here at Gutierrez, I would expect it to take several traffic signal cycles to get through that light during the PM peak hour. It's been interesting recently, the Fresh and Easy store that's under construction here on the southeast corner of the intersection, during the daytime they're actually closing the curb lane while they're doing work on the front of their building, so we've been able to observe what really happens when they close a lane. During the morning, it backs up to Montecito, and you can't get through the signal in one cycle there. PM peak is a busier time. They're supposed to have their traffic control removed by then. But during the PM peak, I'd expect even more congestion. So if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. I'm done. Thank you. So yes, if it wasn't clear, if you like to ask any more questions or give any comments about how you feel, what you want to see, then just raise your hand and I'll...
Well, are you going to go around?
We can go this way. I guess what I'm saying is not everyone has to speak if they don't want to, or they can wait until, if they're not ready, if the wheels are still turning in your head when we get to you, we can come back. But yeah, just going with who feels moved to speak. But we can start on this end. Yeah? Yeah.
This way, before too many NAC members speak, I would actually like to make a motion to for us to make our recommendation at our next scheduled NAC meeting. And this way, the Neighborhood Health and Safety Subcommittee meeting can meet and discuss now that we have all the information. And then this way, we can meet at our regular scheduled meeting and then come up with a proper recommendation to the rest of the members. So, and I don't, to Derek, and I'm not trying to bust your guys' belly, you know, but it was February 8th when I asked for the recommendation. I mean, for the request. For whatever reason, there was misunderstandings. There was other staff. I emailed other staff, and I specified exactly what was needed. Okay, there was a misunderstanding. But since February 8th, I just don't see why it's not. We don't have it. That's just me. Okay, and then also the road diet specification, the diagram, which I did ask as an individual, as a resident. 30 days later, I find out as a resident, you got to go about it a different way, which I wasn't notified. And, you know, we went back and forth over emails, and I was never notified by you. And so that was another month or so wasted. And I just felt the specific diagram is necessary so then the business owners can see exactly what it's going to be. Instead of just saying, oh, okay, we're going to put a restriping road diet, and then later on find out, you know, there's something that they don't like. And if we could have exactly what's going to be striped, would be appreciated. But I still would, to the NAC members, I would like to see if you guys agree to, I mean, for us to make our recommendation at the next scheduled meeting.
And let me just clarify how, since we have two different bodies, how motions would work. If someone from the NAC makes a motion, someone from the NAC has to second the motion, and then after discussion, then they can vote, and we'll do a roll call to make sure everyone is covered on that. If same goes for the TCC, and my understanding is we could have concurrent motions going and discuss all of it. That might be a little messier, but and I would appreciate Browning's guidance on that too.
It's really up to the pleasure of both bodies. If there's a motion that's on the floor that both bodies want to make a similar motion, then you can have concurrent discussion and vote separately. But if the NAC has a different motion than what the TCC might have, then there wouldn't be concurrent discussion on it. Obviously, you're all here as a joint meeting. You all could participate in the conversation, because the TCC might have opinion on what's being discussed, because it is a joint meeting. But when it comes down to voting, you would be voting separately if you have two separate motions.
Right.
And just like to add to the motion, the next scheduled subcommittee meeting will be Monday, April 2nd, 4 p.m. at the Franklin Center. And the next scheduled NAC meeting is April 11th. I'm not sure where. I would think the Davis Center.
Okay, so there's a motion for the NAC. Is there a second? Okay, second by Ms. Walters. And then, I guess, discussion on that from the...
Could you clarify, what were we supposed to do at this meeting? Were we supposed to have a joint? I mean, I know it's not... Were we supposed to make the recommendation? Two separate?
Could be the same, but also could be two separate.
I mean, in other words, how much is there supposed to be a connection between the NAC and the transportation,
Yeah. Are you here to answer that question, Mr. Alvarado?
I just wanted to clarify. Mark Alvarado, with Neighborhood and Outreach Services. What we had discussed at the last NAC meeting, what the purpose of this meeting was to hear the final recommendations from traffic engineering. And then from there, the NAC would make a separate recommendation from the TCC. Okay, that was the intent of this meeting, so that they would give staff enough time to put everything together for a city council hearing in early May. I think May 1st was actually our targeted date for the decision. I'm not sure if we delay your vote tonight, if that'll delay city council. I don't know. I would have to confer with my superiors to see how that would pan out. So I would just want to caution you that if you do delay your vote tonight, I'm not trying to rush you on it, but I can also reiterate that this is probably our 7th gathering on this particular issue, and I think the recommendations are very clear from staff as to what the alternatives are that you can agree or disagree with. And I'll just leave it at that.
Yes. Mr. Trujillo?
Could we make our recommendation with asking that the engineers work with the outreach committee and to make sure that everything's where you want it?
What outreach committee are you?
NAC?
Neighborhood.
It's
a health and safety. Neighborhood health and safety.
Okay, so that's a subcommittee of the NAC?
Instead of delaying the vote.
Well, we're not. This will be the first time we can actually sit down and talk. Due to the Brown Act. I understand you, but I would like for the subcommittee to have everything on the table, talk it over, hash it out, whatnot, and make a good recommendation to the rest of the members, like the way it's supposed to be done.
Ms. Walters?
What happened was we had our last subcommittee meeting, and we pretty much came to a decision. And then the day, as you remember, the day of our subcommittee meeting was when we were notified of the open house that Derek and Pat put on. And then after that, then it was scheduled that we were having the field trip in the bus. And because we're bound by the Brown Act, we were not allowed to discuss these two things that happened subsequent to our last subcommittee meeting. And so, and a few things have changed and new things have come into light, and we, didn't want to violate the Brown Act by saying, well, what do you think about this new arm that wasn't here when we made our decision? And I think that's where we stand.
I think that's understood by me, because I was in that meeting, and I think that what we had talked about was that the Health and Safety Subcommittee was to make a recommendation at the last NAC meeting, but because of these proceedings, we were going to have that recommendation come tonight. But on the floor, Mr. Aldana's saying that he wants to delay his recommendation and gather more information and then bring it to the NAC for a final recommendation. I think that's what's being...
It's not together anymore. It's just now that we have all the information. And last week, I did suggest, or I recommended having a special meeting.
Mm-hmm.
That was on Thursday. Monday, I was told it was denied. So here we. So I was told I could not have it. So I figured if we could have had it on Wednesday, which was yesterday, and then I would have had, or the subcommittee would have had a recommendation, but I was denied. So in a sense, I kind of feel like a new signal, like getting a little blindsided here,
Well, I understand. I understand
so
the concern. I'm just saying that, but it's up to
I haven't
the advisory council.
yet,
It's up to the advisory council what decision you all want to make tonight. It's not. It's still your decision.
How serious would it be if it did delay the city council hearing by a week, 2 weeks? What are we talking about?
We have a tentative date to go to council. It's not time, date certain. Certainly, we could push it back a few weeks. I think the community would like an answer to council as soon as possible. So I think that's why we're here tonight in the joint meeting. But if the Neighborhood Advisory Council isn't ready to make a recommendation, then we can understand that. But I'm not really sure what happened last week where you want to have a special meeting of the. It might have been a 72-hour noticing requirement. I'm really not sure what the problem was.
I made the recommendation, and I was called and said that we could not have it. And the reason why we want it is now that we have all the information. The next scheduled meeting, regular meeting for NAC is April 11th. So you'll have your answer there.
Well, we have to put the agenda, our council report together. What the NAC could easily do, rather than you could just continue your item over until.
If I would not have been denied the meeting, we would have been able to have.
What happened there? I'm not really sure.
I think the understanding was we thought that the recommendation was going to come from the subcommittee tonight to the broader NAC committee, and I think that's the confusion.
Again, another misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's the confusion. So, like I said, I don't know if the final decision is made on April the 11th. If I think that recommendation has to be in the backup to council before the meeting's posted, right? Okay.
Could you repeat what he said in the mic?
He just said we could delay the council meeting.
Okay.
It would be later on in the month of May, probably more towards the end of May, when staff would take it to the city council.
And in your defense, I do think that you all should be given the opportunity, if you're not comfortable making your decision tonight, and we're not pressed to go to council on May the 1st, then I would want you guys to have the most comfortable decision being made. I wouldn't want to say, you're bringing pressure on me.
As far as myself, I would like to have, I like the motion to continue.
Well, let me put it another way. We're not going to go to city council until this item is ready to go to city council. If the Neighborhood Advisory Council is not ready to make a recommendation, then this item is not ready to go to city council.
Okay. So on the motion, yeah. Madam's Chair.
I think that part of the problem was that my guess is that the traffic committee does not have subcommittees, but we have a large group on the NAC, and we've broken into several subcommittees. And the only thing the subcommittee can really do is to my knowledge, is formulate recommendations and bring them up to the full NAC for consideration. And as Sebastian has noted, that was impossible to do because of those time constraints, whether we were unable to have that additional meeting. So for us to meet, bring recommendations up to the full NAC, then it's up to them what they do with them. So I think that's what the problem, that's the origin of the problem. And the large meetings that occurred after our last meeting, lots of new information came, lots of good new information came forward. This report was one of those major items that came forward after our last meeting. So I think Sebastian's got a very good point here that structurally we don't really have much choice because we all wanted to talk, but we couldn't because we were bound by the Brown Act.
And I have a clarifying question. Who makes up the subcommittee?
Sebastian is the chairman.
Chair.
And who?
Holly.
And Naomi. So it's all members of...
Correct.
Yes, all members.
There's six members.
Okay, got it. Yes.
I'd like to call to the question.
Motion.
Oh.
Vote
Okay, so
on the motion.
is there any objection to calling the question? All right.
I just want one quick question. Just to make it easier for our, there's going to be April 2nd, and being that the study analysis and warrant was requested on February 8th, is it possible to have it before 4 o'clock?
Advisory Council Member Aldana, we'll do our best. We have already responded in a memo regarding the background of those traffic signals, pedestrian traffic signals on Cabrillo. In particular, it's my understanding, maybe I can add some additional information that Derek may not have known of, is that my understanding regarding Ambassador Park, that was simply directed by staff. They're really, my understanding, there weren't any warrants done. It was based on the identification of some of the reasons that Derek had noted, but it was anticipation of part of a larger pedestrian concept for Cabrillo is why that traffic signal at Ambassador Park was installed. Regarding Pershing Park, that's the one that we really have to dig through the files to find out. It was built many years ago, and so, however, it did have federal funding, so there had to have been some study done, and so we just need to find that. Bottom line is that is simply that it was a unique circumstance, and I can't speak to it because traffic operations was not in engineering division.
Okay. And yes, I do have a copy right here from dated March 9th, but it just kind of gave a reason. But the reason is not the study analysis and warrant, which was requested. That's all I got to say.
Right. And so Ambassador Park, there was not one. Pershing Park, we have to dig to find it.
There was not one.
That's my understanding. That's what I've been told. But
there was not
we need to check that. I think there was one done. I'm not really sure. The study was done for Bass Street and Castillo Street. I'm not sure about the one at Ambassador Park. We need to check with the design engineer that the city contracted with to see what work he did, and if he still has those files, we'll make those available to your committee.
And I must say, we were spending a lot of time preparing for this, so hopefully, if we don't have too many more meetings to prepare for, we can find those files, but there is a limited staff. Namely, Derek is the only traffic engineer in the city.
All right. Thank you for your time.
All right.
Okay, so the question has been called with no objection, so you need to... Correct. Are people comfortable with a voice vote? Do we need to do a roll call?
May I ask us one more question? How much delay would, if this motion passes, did someone say how much delay this would cause this matter getting up to City Council?
I think they said a couple weeks. Could be pushed to maybe late May.
we're probably looking at May 15th or 22nd. You know, 2 to 3 weeks would be pushed back.
I'd like to ask one more question. May I address this to Chairman Aldana of the NAC committee? Is there additional information over and above that which was presented tonight that you feel is necessary to obtain before we make a final recommendation?
No, we have it all.
Then I'd like to pose a question then, and as part of the discussion, the motion, why don't we meet now? Break and meet and come back with our recommendation this evening.
The subcommittee cannot meet tonight because it is a violation of Brown Act.
Even though this meeting was noticed, this other meeting will still need to be noticed. Okay, thank you. That answers my question.
Okay, so the motion is to the committee. Did I hear someone say roll call or not? Voice vote. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, does everybody understand the motion? Okay.
Can you repeat the motion?
Could you repeat the motion?
Repeat the motion. Yes, to postpone our recommendation until our next scheduled meeting, which will be April 11th, and the next scheduled NAC meeting, subcommittee meeting is April 2nd, Monday, April 2nd, 4 p.m., Franklin Neighborhood Center.
Okay, so all those in favor of the motion?
Discussion?
We had discussion, but go for it.
I'd like to add that one, I think, valuable input would be the recommendations of the Traffic Committee as well. I assume that's going to happen this evening. That would be a very valuable input for our deliberations afterwards. If that's the case, then I would support the motion.
Okay.
Yes, that is the case.
So, yeah.
So let's say it went back to the subcommittee and then it would go back to the NAC, but it's not on our agenda. How's that going to work?
You would put it on. Put it on.
You're gonna have to.
As an action item?
That'll probably be the only item.
Right.
Yeah, he'll post it.
Yeah, my understanding of the way these things work, that this motion puts that on the agenda if it passes.
That's correct.
Right. Okay. So, are we ready? Okay. So, all those in favor on the NAC of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, one opposed. And any abstentions? No abstentions. Okay. So for the NAC, then that recommendation and decision on a recommendation will be postponed until April 11th. So now there's still another committee here, and they, need an opportunity to make comments and possibly a motion to go forward with some type of recommendation. So we can start over here and move around if you like. You don't have to. You don't have to go first if you don't want. Ms. Horn.
See, I think you almost have to do Ortega separately from Yananali and not put them all in one motion, I'm assuming. Am I coming through? Hello?
You could put it on one motion, you could do a couple, you could whatever. It'll get passed on to council and staff.
I would mostly like to comment just on the Ortega intersection and just say that I think that the making it a two-lane, the transition striping is a fantastic idea, and it's certainly worked well on Cliff Drive. And my experience is that cars really slowed down, so that would, in my opinion of what I've seen, that it would also address the speed issue, and also part of the long-term plan with making room possibly for more sidewalk space and things like that. So. This restriping, the flashing lights, I think that the crosswalks should continue to be striped, not remove the crosswalks, and the center partial refuge for safe place for the pedestrians. So those things just all seem so smart and so helpful and would immediately supply a lot more safety for all users. So that's what I would like to comment.
All right, and we can go around and have comments and then figure out a motion if we need to, whatever, and we can go back around. Mr. Bradley?
Yeah, the easy part seems to be the road diet, striping. I didn't hear much, I don't think I heard any opposition to that part. I mean, even if somebody really did, even if you really do want a traffic signal there, it could be a road narrowing in combination with a signal, because, I mean, De La Guerra already has a signal and it will be narrowed there too. So, but I think the road diet itself is a good solution. Now, as far as both intersections, it seems like there's kind of a trade-off between, I like at both intersections the median island with the flashing signal. Even though you'd lose some parking down at Yananali, I would still favor it. But at both intersections, it seems like a traffic signal would be even a little bit safer for pedestrians and a little more convenient, but it would be a little less safe for drivers and a little less convenient. So we're really coming down to a policy question of, do we favor the drivers or the pedestrians? And that's a policy question that I think City Council should answer. I mean, I would favor the pedestrians because they're more vulnerable. If a pedestrian gets hit, they're probably going to die or at least get hurt really badly. Whereas if most car accidents don't end up that way. But I would like to see us put at both intersections, put both the traffic signal and the safest alternative solution, which I think is the median island with the flashing light. Put those two options in front of council and let them decide on one. The worst thing that could happen is it wouldn't be that it would be nothing. I think we have to avoid that. So that's where I am.
Okay. Skip over me for now. Mr. Falcon-Gray?
Okay. Well, first off, I agree with Committee Member Bradley. The road diet or transitioning striping, to me, is just a given. I think it would solve so many problems as far as the side swiping on cars parking on Milpa Street in that area. It would add a little more safety feeling for bicyclists. They would have a separate lane there. And I think in general, just by looking what's happened at Cliff Drive, I think to me, at Cliff Drive, it makes you go slower. It really does. I drive that every day, and sure, I go at the speed limit, but if you start creeping up a little bit faster, there's usually a car right there in front of you to make you stay at 40 miles an hour. So to me, I think it works very well. And just the vision of a narrower street makes you go slower. So in the first part, on Ortega and Milpas, I didn't like option 2A with the medium on the north side of the street. Because of the drainage in that area, the crosswalk would actually be not at the corner. It would be kind of more towards the middle, away from the intersection. So I really liked 3C. I still like the option of adding the curb extensions in that corner. It'd make it easier to cross. So my preference is 3C, but my really preference is put a signal there. I've heard all these warrants. I've been through this committee for many years, and we've lost signals because of explanations of warrants. But I think, this area, you're talking about a school, a bus stop, which we need to keep the bus stop where it is, and there's not enough in that area. We just need to make it safe for people to go to school. And I think the signal is the way to go there. I think we need to go on the lean towards pedestrians versus cars in this instance and really make sure the neighborhood's safe. We want to have a walkability off here to the Milpas area, and that would make it people feel safer to cross back and forth. So I'm looking at a combination of put a signal there, narrow the the road diet, do the curb extensions. Probably would not need the medium with a signal. I think that probably wouldn't have to be part of it. So you're kind of looking at a 2B and with the 3C with the curb extension. But I think a combination of the two. If you cannot do the signals, then go to the 3C in that area. And Milpas and Yananali, that is a tough intersection. There's so much traffic. It's very narrow there. Again, I'm just going with signals. I mean, put the signal there. And the main thing I noticed, and I talked to Sherry Fisher, and I asked a question about why is that bus stop on the north end and not on the other side, on the right-hand side? Because when we were standing there during the visit, the buses would stop, and definitely if they got off the bus, it's hard for them to see to cross the street there, where if the bus was on the other side, like most bus stops are. I realize it has to probably do with property owners, and the parking there would have to be removed, but to me, that would be a help, is just move the bus stop from the north side to the south side, going south on Milpas on that corner. But again, if you can't do the signal, which I prefer, then option 6 with the medium island, and of course those flashers I think would be great. So that's my recommendation, is put signals on both of them, if possible. If not, 3C in the one area and option 6 for the other. Thank you.
Mr. Tabor?
I hate to agree
Microphone.
With Mr. I hate to agree with Mr. Kaufman. Right, because he's always driving so slow on Cliff Drive, but I think when you look at the question to us is basically improving options for pedestrian improvements on Milpas Street, and I think the one that comes closest to serving the greatest needs of the pedestrians is signalization. I can see on Canon Perdido Street with the road diet that the signal flashers could work there. I don't see, without the road diet, them working at Yananali Street. I think the most dangerous thing I see, my own experience on crossing the street, whether it's Cabrillo with 2 lanes of traffic, De La Vina with 2 lanes of traffic, someone waits at the corner, some person in the middle of the street stops, and then you don't know whether you can cross because no one else has stopped. And if you take that first step off the curb, you're just got your fingers crossed that everyone else is going to stop, because once you get in front of that car, they can't see you coming. So that's why I think the Yananali is such a tough call with 2 lanes going both directions and flashers, because my observations there is the flashers are visible, but you just cannot guarantee that next car is going to stop. So I'm leaning towards signaling Yananali, and I agree that flashers could work at Canon Perdido. Or Ortega, right. And of the options there, of the 3B or 3C, if that's the way it goes, I don't know that the median island is, it looks a little confusing there with the bulb outs and the median island for 3C. I might lean towards 3B because you have 1 lane going each direction and a single row of cars each direction with a flasher there. I think it'll be a safe crossing.
Okay, so first of all, I really appreciate all the input, and obviously people have gone on to live their lives and go home and have dinner, hopefully, and maybe watch from home. But I really appreciate everybody who's been engaged, and obviously not everybody could make it tonight, but people who've been to all the other meetings and people who have given their input. It seems like there's been a lot of real community engagement around this, and we always like to see that no matter what. So I really appreciate that. I think one thing I'm kind of hearing consensus around on the TCC is the neighborhood transition striping or the road diet. I'm one of the ones who asked about why don't we just take it all the way to Yananali, and I understand that would be really gnarly, especially towards Gutierrez. So I get that. I'm kind of trying in the vein of the Milpas visioning that apparently happened and then didn't happen due to, the wishes of the business owners or what have you, back when it was brought up. I think that, I know we want to get something done. We want to get something done soon because anything will make it safer, hopefully, no matter what we do on Milpas. But I think taking a view that is not just, this is our one shot at doing something on Milpas, so you either got to throw everything at it or, do this one thing or we're never coming back again, so you better make the right decision, is not really the way that we should be looking at it. So, and I'm not saying everyone is or anyone is, but I think not necessarily taking a super measured and slow approach, but trying something to see how it actually works in the roadway and, things that seemingly will make things better. I'm a big fan of road diets. I've seen what it did on Cliff Drive. I live in the Upper De La Vina area. It's not, miraculous, fabulous pedestrian paradise, but it feels much safer with that configuration. So definitely supportive of that. I think the rapid flashing beacons and the pedestrian islands, of which there are many configurations, would be pretty effective. I don't know. I'm kind of torn between the overhead and the one actually in the roadway on the median. I feel like that would be more visible, especially. I noted that picture right next to Alpha Thrift where you've kind of modeled what the thing would look like. Sometimes when those ficus trees get a little yellow, I would be worried that it kind of in that picture looks like it sort of blends into the tree because those trees are like right at that height. So I would be worried about that. But I think what Mr. Trujillo said earlier about can we see what works, and then if we see it's not working or some unforeseen consequences come up, can we revisit it and can we move forward? Because obviously Milpas needs some love, and not just in the roadway, right? A larger kind of master plan sort of thing, obviously, is something that a business district like that deserves. So I would love to be a part of something moving forward that's more holistic in the approach. But I think that taking a look at something that we know will most likely save lives and make it a lot safer for folks, that it's worth doing that now and then moving forward, seeing how it's perceived by the people who use it every day. Do they feel safer? Is it still super scary? Whatever, and do that outreach to get feedback to find out, what it's really like on the ground. So I guess all that, I'm not really working on emotion necessarily, but those are the things that if it just looks like down the road it's a signal or nothing, and like nothing has been fixed by changing the striping or putting in beacons, then maybe that's something that we, are forced to move towards. But I think we might be able to take some steps that would make major improvements in the meantime. Are there other comments from the committee or anybody else you guys can talk to?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Well, I just by listening to the committee members, I see a consensus on the road diet in the upper part, so I think that could be part of a motion. I kind of saw a consensus for a signal at least at the Yananali area. Seems like it was less maybe for Coda. So that's something, Ortega, I don't know why I keep saying okay. So, so I think we could maybe start crafting a motion here. I would move that we recommend the road diet between, down
Down to Coda?
Cannon Perdido down to Coda? North Dakota, yeah. As part one.
Okay.
And I also seem to hear the support for medium islands, but then I also heard more support for the signal right down at Yananoli and Milpas. So I would maybe recommend to council that we would prefer a signal at Milpas and Yananoli. Now, maybe we should do a separate motion for the other intersection, I'm not sure, but maybe we can get it all in one motion. And as you heard, I preferred the signal at Ortega and Milpas, but I'd be open to maybe doing the option 3B or C for that intersection if there's not enough support for a signal up there.
I have a suggestion.
Huh?
I have a suggestion.
Okay.
If we do, just so we can give as much information to council as possible, to be as clear in our recommendations as possible about where people are at on different levels, maybe if we did separate motions on the different sections so that they would know, like, oh, well, they're unanimous about this.
Okay.
Or they're split on
So
that,
let's
on
make a
something like
motion for the road diet from Cannon Perdido down to Coda.
Okay. All right. Mike?
Well, do we need to combine that with something at the intersection? Not for the other intersection.
Well, I was thinking just the road diet, and then for each intersection, we could do a different recommendation if we want to add the mediums, the flashers, the, whatever we want to add.
Okay, so the first
So this
motion.
is, to me, is going to be the easiest one.
All right, we like easy.
I think.
Okay. Okay, so is there any more discussion on the motion about the neighborhood transition striping to Coda? Okay. Yes. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, so that motion is unanimous. Okay.
You want me to
Keep going.
Keep going? Okay.
Keep
Well, let's move down. Let's do the Milpas and Yananoli, because it seemed like I saw more support for a signal in that area. I move that we recommend to council to move forward with a traffic signal at Milpas and Yananoli. And I don't think we would need the other options in that with the traffic signal, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
I guess there is a chance that council would not follow our recommendation, and then we would want to be on record with what we think of those remaining two options.
Okay, so maybe word it as
our recommendation
is we support a traffic signal at that intersection. If that, our second option for that intersection would be option 6.
Can you
Option 6
say what
is
option
with
6 is?
the medium island.
Median refuge island with pedestrian
Yeah,
activated
it would be a
flashers.
medium refuge island with pedestrian activated flashers. That would be our second option.
I would second that.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend to council Plan A, signalizing Yananali, and if failing that, Plan B, Option 6, which is a median refuge island with pedestrian activated flashing lights. So that's the motion.
Yeah, that's
Is
the-
there
that's good.
discussion on the motion? Can you use the mic? Can you repeat yourself? Sorry.
Can we separate those out, the signal and the option 6?
One is just an option to the other.
Well,
You may
let's
have
vote on the
different
signal
priorities,
first.
Commissioner.
Do you mean a traffic signal?
Yes, the traffic signal.
And do you see that in option 6?
No,
No, these
if
were-
we do the traffic signal first.
Okay.
If council decides that it doesn't warrant a traffic signal there, if they decide not to go that direction, we want to show our support for some improvements in that area, and those improvements would be option 6, which would be the medium island refuge with the flashers.
Okay. I have to vote against it then.
So can we do just the traffic signal first and see if that passes?
Okay, so we'll cancel that other one.
So
and then-
I move
Yeah.
that we, I withdraw my motion.
There we go.
Do you withdraw your second?
I'll withdraw your motion. There is no second. But,
Okay.
I feel uncomfortable voting on just the traffic signal without a backup plan. I feel uncomfortable voting on just the traffic signal without a backup plan.
Well, why don't, we could have two motions. We could vote on the first one and then also do a motion on the second one, and they would know how the committee voted on the two. I move that the TCC support a signal at the corner of Milpas and Yananoli.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Discussion?
Well, Susan, do you have some concern there you'd like to express?
I can't vote for the signal. I mean, I would love to because that's what the community wants, but I really think that the road diet and the flashing signals and the refuge all need a trial before going to something that's been proven to be more dangerous for collisions. So, I mean, I can't, in my mind, justify voting for something that's going to cause more accidents.
All right, any more discussion? Okay, so all those in favor?
Aye.
Is that 2? Okay. So Mr. Bradley, Mr. Kaufman-Gray, all those opposed?
Opposed.
Nay. Wait, are we nay?
Nay.
Okay.
A nay.
So 3-2. Okay, so the motion fails.
Okay, so I moved to go for option 6 for Milpas and Yananoli. That's with the pedestrian island and the flashing signals.
Second.
Flashing.
Sorry, discussion. Does that mean is our primary recommendation on this intersection?
We haven't recommended anything on the intersection yet because that motion failed, so. Okay, other discussion?
My only discussion would be, I think the original motion was what I could support.
Okay.
I agree with Mr. Tabor there.
Okay. Any more discussion? I second.
Oh, with the two combined, okay.
It may come back, who knows? But I second that motion that you just made to put the pedestrian refuge island and our FB lights there. Any more discussion? Okay. All those in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. No? Do we know what we're voting on?
I'm confused. Okay, option 6 just the way it is in here?
Yes.
Okay, I'm good then.
So an aye?
Aye.
An aye. Any others? Okay, nays?
No.
Nay.
Okay. Okay. All right, so that motion fails. So here we are.
I go back to the original motion that was withdrawn, and that is to support the signal. First recommendation to council to support the signal at Milpas and Yananoli with a second option of option 6 with the pedestrian island and the flashers.
Second.
Discussion on this. Again, deja vu. No? All right. So all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 And opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to abstain on that. Three ayes, 1 no, 1 abstention.
Oh, Mark said, okay.
Okay.
It passed.
So it passes, yes.
Okay, I move on to Milpas and Ortega. No, we voted on Yananoli.
Yeah, we were just doing Yananoli.
We did the striping. So the third motion to City Council, I'm going to try the motion for a signal at the corner of Milpas and Ortega.
Okay, so the motion is for a signal at Milpas and Ortega. Is there a second? Okay, so that dies for lack of second. Try again.
Okay,
You're doing great, though.
Okay, I move that we go for option 3C, which is, let me read this off, without the, we already voted on the intrinsic striping, so this would be with the median refuge island, curb extensions, and pedestrian activated flashers.
Second. Discussion on that? Everybody know what 3C is? We've already voted to support neighborhood transition striping, so that's already moving forward as a recommendation. But the median refuge island, curb extensions, and pedestrian activated flashing lights under 3C. So just to be clear, because there were several different configurations of a ped island at that. Just want to...
Yeah, 3C has the pedestrian island on the south side of the intersection with the curb extensions.
Okay. So, yeah, 3C, that has it on the, south side of the intersection. They're only guarded, the island's only on one side of the pedestrian, correct?
Correct.
3C?
It could be either.
Can you come on? I think we may have questions about this. It could be either?
It could be either. It wasn't shown as an alternative, but we could configure the island such that the crosswalk passes through the island with a curb extension.
Okay. So let's just bear with. Can we look at this? Yeah, and other folks can definitely ask questions too, or make comments. And let's get it up on here so we're all on the same page. Literally. 3C?
Right. 2C.
There's 3B.
But it's
3C.
It's on the other side, though, which I didn't like. Oh, it's 2B. But they're on the north side.
That would require a longer curb extension.
Okay, let's listen to listen to Derek here.
I'll draw this up on the screen so everybody can see. Something like that.
Anybody have a Sharpie?
Exactly.
Because we can't see that.
Negative.
Black pen.
No Sharpie? Anyone? It's a bigger pen. Oh, that's better. All right. Awesome.
So a longer curb extension would be required. The median nose would look something like that. Like that, and then the ramps would be something like so. So the negative with a configuration like this is we may have to eliminate some parking in these areas here. I really couldn't say until I was able to draft this up.
Okay. And what would happen to the other side of the intersection?
There are a number of options. Generally, we prefer to concentrate pedestrians to one leg of the intersection. It increases the driver's expectation of where the crossings are happening. This side of the intersection, you could do a number of things. A curb extension at this corner would require removing the bus stop. A curb extension on this corner, and I'll draw it in, could be done. It wouldn't match that other side of the road, however, it would create a shorter crossing distance. as well. We could likely squeeze a median refuge island in on this side as well. Again, it would probably have to be the one where the pedestrian passes near the end, because one located right about here would require removal of the bus stop. Again, I just want to reiterate that this throat width right here is likely going to be a concern of the fire department. It is. Yeah. Yeah. So we would have to run that past the fire department.
Yeah, I had wrote in my notes that 3C was not fire truck friendly, right? You said that. Okay.
I'm sorry, when you're saying remove the bus, you're taking it totally away from that or moving it back, or are you talking about it just has to disappear to another
It would
block?
have to go away. The bus stop.
Okay.
The bus stop located here, there isn't enough room to move it further north because of a business driveway. So anything in this area here that wouldn't allow the bus to pull in parallel to the curb would require us just to eliminate the bus stop altogether.
But you said both blocks? Or just this one on the, yeah.
Just specifically this one at Ortega.
And not across the street?
There is only one bus stop at this intersection.
Gotcha.
Yep, just the northbound location.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Ms. Fisher from MTD, I think, had a clarifying remark.
Although, Sherry Fisher with MTD, although normally I would never want to remove a bus stop, I want you all to understand that there is a bus stop within a block north of this. So there's one above De La Guerra. So that if this makes the whole thing safer, then certainly we're for removing the bus stop. And the other thing you could consider is if you remove the bus stop, you may get back some of the parking that you're worried about losing. So it's just a consideration for you.
Was there a comment over here?
Question to whomever. Could the bus stop be moved on the other side of Ortega? Yeah.
This area here?
Mm-hmm.
Potentially. That's, yeah, it would be a near-side bus stop, again, which creates visibility problems at unsignalized intersections. Yeah.
Right. Because of the width of the bus.
Blocks this. Yes. Okay. But that is that empty lot that I suggested the city purchase and put in a parking lot, right? So that if there were lost parking spaces, the merchants would have their customers going to that lot. Is that the empty lot?
That's the empty lot. Yeah.
That is an empty lot, yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think I have a motion on the floor.
You do.
Yes. My question, though, maybe before you leave, so you're saying any of the curb extension proposals on the, because what you did was with the sidewalk in the middle of the pedestrian island. The one that's listed here does not have that. Are you saying that the fire department also says that one is also not safe for them to make turning radius?
We haven't approached the fire department with any of these alternatives yet, but knowing what the fire department's concerns are, it's this throat width right here. So regardless of how we configure that median refuge island, whether it's the crosswalk passing through the island or past the end of the island, that throat width would stay the same.
But that is a dead-end street, so you're talking about when they leave the dead-end street, that would be the problem?
There are two concerns that the fire department would have. One is their ability to turn this corner, and that it is a dead-end street. It's highly unlikely. Another concern that they have is if there's ever, for whatever reason, an obstruction in this area here, a car stalls, an accident happens right here, blocking their ability to get through. Where they like to have 20 feet, preferably 22 feet, available to them. It gives them room to bypass something if a vehicle does stall or an accident does happen.
Okay. Well, then, with that knowledge, then, the motion that was, I don't believe it was seconded. I was just framing the
I think I did, but I'm happy to withdraw if you're moving in a different direction.
Well, yeah, I was just saying that so we wouldn't have this conflict that we'd have to worry about, is just move on without the curb extensions, but have the island. But my motion would be for the island positioned on that side of the street, the south side, not the north side, because then it wouldn't affect the bus stop at all. So my motion is to put the center island with the flashers, the lower flashers, on the south side of the corner of Ortega and Milpas, without the curb extensions.
Is there a second?
Did I hear?
Discussion.
We need a second before we can discuss it.
I second it.
Okay, so there's a second from Ms. Horn. So discussion?
Yeah, I don't think because there's potential, maybe, objection to a certain design of a curb extension is a reason not to recommend it. We could say we prefer a curb extension if it can be designed in a way that makes it work. I mean, you have leeway as to how big a curb extension is. That's one thing. It can be 4 feet or 7 feet or somewhere in between, right? So,
Actually, it's this one without the curb.
so I liked his original motion.
He always likes the old ones. I have a question. So could you do that configuration with it on the south side with one curb extension on the one by the empty lot? Could you do, so basically to split the refuge island into two, you have to move it back and have the ramps split out, right?
Yes.
Okay. So if you just had, and could you do that with just a curb extension on one side?
I can't answer with certainty, but I'm kind of thinking we would have a conflict in this area, where the existing curb is.
Okay.
In this area here, there's a tree, street light, and there maybe even be a fire hydrant right there. So obviously the tree and the street light would be more difficult.
So the problem is the combination of a curb extension and the pedestrian island, and if you take that curb extension out, the ped island is still a problem for space for fire trucks.
The ped island can work.
If it's in one piece.
If it's in one piece.
Right.
Got it.
On the south side.
Okay.
So that was the original 3C. That was in one piece, right? Yeah.
Right, 3C, right, one piece and with curb extensions. Right.
So I guess the question I
or
have
you
on
drove
this,
them in. Okay.
Okay, well, and then it gets back to the question, so you could have a curb extension on the one side and not on the other, and it doesn't look like it would affect the traffic flow then. I mean, on the west, is that the north side? Yeah. Because you have a turn lane, so it doesn't look like that would block for the fire department from making a turn into the Santa Barbara Junior High School if they had to.
Right. And if there were something constructed on this corner, we would have a radius that's sweeping enough that a larger vehicle, such as a fire truck, could easily make that turn.
Well, did we second the second motion that I had?
Yeah, I think Susan
I thought it was 3C you were.
Right. Well, 3C is what I wanted, but then there was a discussion about not liking the curb extension on the south side. I'd like to redo it to 3C with the curb extension only on the north side, as figured.
Okay, so the north.
Where the
empty lot is?
Where the empty lot is. And not have a curb extension on the south side, because that would free up any potential problems. Yet it would make it shorter for pedestrians to cross.
So, but.
I think you should clarify where's where.
Yeah. Maybe we can number the corners. That would be awesome.
Select is where the empty lot is.
And if the ability to turn the air conditioning on is in anyone's power, that would be amazing.
Or open the door. Or open the door.
Thank you. Okay, so we've got them labeled now. So we
Okay,
can
so my motion is the 3C as we see it, without the curb extension on the southwest corner? No.
This corner?
Yes.
Southwest.
Without that extension, but have it on the southeast corner.
Southeast only.
So
Yes.
you're amending your...
Yes, I'm
I mean,
amending.
what's the protocol here? Do you have to just, it's been seconded, so you just have to vote it?
No, you can scrap it. If you both agree, you can scrap it or change it or whatever. It belongs to the body, but let's be clear. Let's name all the corners that would have a curb extension in what you're proposing.
My proposal is only one curb extension, southeast.
Okay.
Do we really need to get this specific? I mean, is it helpful? It's because this is going to be redesigned many more times, probably.
I think it's probably helpful to...
Okay.
We'd like to help council.
Yeah. Doing the dirty work here. Okay, so, Ms. Horn, do you...
Yes.
You're still with it?
Do you agree with that motion?
Sure.
Okay, so...
Helping you go.
So just to clarify then, what the motion is to recommend about the Milpas and Ortega intersection to have a curb extension on the southeast corner and a pedestrian refuge island two-part.
Wait.
No.
No, one
No.
part. Okay,
As in 3C.
got it. One part pedestrian refuge island on the south side of the intersection. Stop.
And pedestrian activated flashers.
And pedestrian activated flashing beacons. Got it right?
That's right.
Okay. All right. So there's a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Further discussion?
Just briefly, I think we wanted to minimize crossing distance. That's why we asked for the bulb outs to be put in there. That's probably a bad word, sorry. And two, it might be more visible with the flashers in place there. I've seen the flashers working both in Washington, D.C. and in Arizona. I think it was in Scottsdale, Arizona. And they're same ones, and they get your attention. So I don't think they're going to be less visible because they're a few feet further back, despite all the obstructions on Milpas Street, that they're going to be visible. So I support that.
Okay. Any more discussion on that? Okay. So all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Hey, all those opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so that's unanimous. All right. Are there any more recommendations or anything to do with Milpas that
Madam
has
Chair?
been noticed?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I just quickly, I think good comments about, and I'm trusting staff is following up on this also. Part of the recommendation, I think, is mandatory that there's a very short-term follow-up on the post-implementation conditions and how things have changed. And I'm all for long-range planning, so here's some ideas there, too, in the future.
Okay. Ms. Molina?
I just wanted to make a comment. First of all, I want to thank you for that we did this. I think it was important. It was important for the community. And I think it gave a sense of trust that we're trying to really work on the process. So I thank everybody for participating. But the only negative thing that I see is that with and it was said earlier, with the media, this has become a very controversial and negative issue. And I don't know why. And I hope as elected members representing the city that we as committees do not represent this issue as a negative issue. It's not meant to be a negative issue. It was meant to be a protection issue and to address an issue that is not new. It's been around for a while. So I don't know how we do that, but I am certainly very concerned that I don't want to be part of a negative. It was never meant to be that. And I just hope that both committees support the fact that we're trying to do something positive, not negative, as it's been portrayed in the press. Okay?
Well said. I'd second that, if that were in the form of a motion. Yeah, Ms. Fisher.
I'd like to
Could you come to the mic? Sorry.
First of all, I'd like to
like to ask the NAC if you would prefer to have somebody from MTD there at your meeting to answer any questions. This has been delightful, but it's been long. So you can.
That would be good.
Okay, Teresa, and you can get
Yes.
you can get back to me, certainly, too. If you.
I'll get back to you, Sherry.
And I'd just like to applaud your bravery, Mr. Kaufman-Gray, for making all those motions, and thank you all for giving this kind of time to transportation on Milpas. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right. Any
Chair Blackerby,
things?
before we
Yes.
leave, just let the TCC know that we will have a meeting in April. We have
Okay.
a couple items for the TCC to take action on.
Okay, great. Anything else from either committee? All right. Yes. Could you speak into the mic? Sorry, I got to be a stickler to the end.
Thank you for doing such a nice job as the chair for these combined committees, whatever it is. You know, this combination wasn't. It's not a typical meeting for you, so we appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's my first meeting as chair, so I can do anything after this. So, yay! All right. So a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I move.
And second. All those in favor? Aye. All right.